The morning sky over Winterfell was awash in shades of gray and dawn-born pale gold, blending into a soft haze that spread like a subdued promise over the ramparts. A few shimmering clouds dappled the horizon, and from the highest tower one could see the winter snows receding in the fields beyond, the newly awakened grasses peeking through patches of melting frost. Sansa Stark stood on the battlements, her face turned into the chill wind that smelled faintly of pine and crisp ice. The northern breeze carried echoes of a kingdom on the brink of transformation, and behind her calm composure she felt the steady pulse of an impossible ambition thrum in her veins. She recalled the many mornings she had spent wondering if there was a future for House Stark after the Great War. Their ancient line, battered but unbroken, seemed destined to rebuild only in the north, to remain watchful guardians of a realm that still did not fully understand the danger that had loomed beyond the wall. But Sansa's perspective had grown with every trial, every betrayal, and every heartbreak. It had grown in the Red Keep, in the Vale, and most profoundly upon her return to the north, where she assumed responsibilities that once would have seemed impossible for the young girl who had naively traveled south to be betrothed to a prince. Now she felt older than the worn stones beneath her feet, older than the whistling wind that spoke of the ghosts of House Stark. In the courtyard below she saw a gathering of guards, stable hands, and a handful of advisors. The hum of activity rose in a steady murmur. Repairs still needed to be done on one of the walls damaged by the siege that had come with the Whites. Ravens flew in and out of the rookery, for in these changed times messages flew swiftly across the realm. No corner of Westeros was untouched by strife or the tentative steps toward a newly shaped peace. Sansa had partaken in the forging of this peace, but her role had been overshadowed by the heroes and rulers who'd taken center stage in the War of the Living. Despite her essential part in the North's resilience, she recognized that her story and the North's was only just beginning. She inhaled the crisp morning air, lips curving in a faint smile tinged with the sorrow of memory. Jon Snow had gone beyond the wall with the free folk, choosing a life of exile and quiet among the people he had long championed. Arya had sailed west, perhaps never to return. Bran, the new king of the Six Kingdoms, governed from King's Landing, though he had left the north to Sansa, who was now queen of an independent realm. For a time, the Starks were scattered like seeds in the wind, each taking root in different corners of the world. Yet the blood of the first men still threaded through them, binding them as close as any family could be, perhaps closer, for they had survived horrors unimaginable to most. But it was a fragile peace. The North's independence was welcomed by neither all lords in the south nor even all in the north, where the scars of war made the forging of a stable kingdom difficult. Resources ran thin after the endless winter, and hungry mouths outnumbered granaries. Tensions still simmered among the lords, who felt overshadowed by Winterfell's growing influence. Across the sea, in the ashes of Essos, new powers stirred. In King's Landing, Bran's rule was marked by a measured calm, though his decisions often confounded those who wanted a more hands-on king. Change was in the air like the crackle of lightning before a storm, and, unbeknownst to many, dragons, though once thought nearly extinct again, had left behind seeds of possibility that even the sharpest minds could hardly guess. Sansa turned away from the view, her thick cloak swirling at her ankles, the embroidered dire wolf of House Stark standing out in silver thread. She walked steadily toward the winding stairs that led into the halls of Winterfell. Already, her mind was set on the tasks of the day. She had grown used to the mantle of leadership, though it weighed on her shoulders. Her childhood illusions had been shed years ago, replaced by a tempered sense of duty. Everything she did now was for her people, her family. But for all the power that came with being queen in the north, she had learned the limitations of a single realm. Westeros was vast, with alliances that could secure a kingdom's future or tear it down from within. She had seen such alliances shape and destroy lives. She had been a pawn in strategic marriages, a commodity to be bargained. The memory of Joffrey's cruelty rose, and she pushed it down. That was long ago. She was no pawn now. She was a queen, as sharp and unyielding as the northern winters themselves. And she knew that if the north was to truly be safe, it could not remain isolated, forever at odds with the rest of Westeros. There needed to be more than mere alliances of convenience. The realm needed a bond powerful enough to heal old wounds and forge a shared destiny. It was that whisper of destiny that had arrived in the shape of a raven 3 weeks past. Word from King's Landing spoke of a rumored Targaryen heir. There had been rumors before, pretenders and speculators, threads of the old monarchy that had claimed to hold a right to the Iron Throne long lost. But this was different. The rumor spoke of a hidden Targaryen, the child of Daenerys Stormborn, unknown to the world, or so the letter claimed. Sansa had read it with a mixture of disbelief and faint stirring hope. The Targaryens were all but gone, undone by madness and war. Jon himself was of Targaryen blood, Rhaegar's son, but the realm had never openly embraced him as such. He had made no claim, and his path no longer led him among the great houses. Could it be that Daenerys left a legacy other than the ash and fear that accompanied her final days? Sansa had tried to dismiss the rumor. It could be the plot of someone seeking the Targaryen name to rally old loyalties, or a scheme from unscrupulous lords who wished to sow discontent against Bran's rule. Yet the letter hinted at evidence, tangles of genealogical records, hidden birth accounts, and even mention of one who had traveled across the sea in search of rightful lineage. She had heard, too, from the northern trade routes that a small retinue of foreign travelers had been seen heading south, always seeking knowledge of House Targaryen. They said a silver-haired woman traveled under heavy veils, her accent exotic, her manners guarded. A lesser ruler might have dismissed these stories as the usual rumor mill, but Sansa had a knack for gleaning truth from tangled half-lies. She had learned that skill from Petyr Baelish, even if she despised the memory of him. The possibility that a genuine Targaryen heir walked the soil of Westeros was too significant to ignore. If true, the realm stood at a crossroads once again. For decades, Targaryen claims had fueled wars and rebellions. Daenerys' arrival had nearly undone King's Landing in Dragonfire. Yet the Targaryen name still carried weight, a promise of power or a threat of chaos. It depended entirely on which side of the realm one stood. For days, Sansa had paced her solar, pondering what to do. She had sent her own discreet spies to watch roads and keep eyes on the travelers rumored to be making their way through Westeros. Reports trickled in that the retinue had been seen in the Riverlands, then approaching the Crownlands. Some said they were heading for King's Landing. Others swore they were heading to Dragonstone. Sansa felt the heavy press of possibility. If a Targaryen existed, how would her brother, King Bran, respond? How would the lords of Westeros react, worn as they were by war and famine? The name Targaryen alone might incite rebellion or restore faith in old loyalties. And then there was the matter of dragons. The last living dragons had perished with Daenerys, or so it was believed. But rumor spoke differently of eggs hidden away, guarded by loyalists in secret strongholds. If such eggs existed, a Targaryen heir might bring them forth, attempt to reclaim a throne, or do worse. By that quiet morning in Winterfell, Sansa had resolved to uncover the truth herself. She would not leave the fate of the realm to rumor or to the uncertain politics of others. She would extend an invitation to whoever this claimant was to come north under a flag of truce. She would meet them on her own terms. She would decide, with the insight gleaned from her own experiences, whether this Targaryen was a threat or an ally. The North had no desire to be consumed by the Games of Thrones again, but the North could not afford to be ignorant of a power that might one day reshape Westeros. It was that morning that Mira Reed arrived unexpectedly at Winterfell's gate, bringing with her a letter written in Bran's own hand. Sansa recognized her brother's neat, almost detached scrawl. He offered no direct advice, only instructions: be mindful. The traveler with silver hair is real. She seeks something beyond the throne. Remember what you learned. The realm needs unity. The letter ended abruptly without farewell, a trait that had become typical of Bran's messages since he had become king. In those bare words, Sansa gleaned a deeper meaning. Bran, with his uncanny knowledge, seemed to be guiding her toward a path that might shape the future. Was she to welcome this Targaryen? Could there be a peace forged between the last living Starks and the last of House Targaryen? The idea seemed as impossible as the notion that the North and South might share a single, stable realm. Yet deep in her heart, something whispered that perhaps this was exactly the turning point she had been waiting for. The era of old grudges might be undone by forging new bonds. And if anyone understood the power of forging new bonds, it was Sansa Stark. So the ravens were sent, traveling under her seal as queen in the north, inviting the silver-haired traveler and her retinue to dine at Winterfell under the guest rite. She worded it carefully, offering courtesy and promising safe passage. She enclosed a personal missive reminding them that the North honored its traditions of hospitality but would not tolerate falsehood or threats. Then she waited, continuing her work of governing, giving no hint to her own advisors about the full import of her invitation. Many of the northern lords were fixated on immediate concerns: harvest shortages, trade disputes, small pockets of lawlessness in the far-flung reaches of the kingdom. They barely took note of the invitation, presuming it was yet another of the queen's political engagements, forging alliances that might secure much-needed resources. 2 weeks later, word came that the silver-haired retinue was nearing Moat Cailin. Sansa had not realized how on edge she was until she read the scout's report. She had spent her entire adult life bracing for deception. Yet some part of her, the part that still believed in the possibility of a future unshackled by fear, yearned for hope. A Targaryen and a Stark forging something new. Could that be the path toward true stability for the North and the rest of Westeros? She would soon find out. When the retinue finally arrived on a mild afternoon, the sky was pale with drifting clouds and the courtyard was swept clean. The travelers came modestly despite the grandeur that might be expected of someone claiming Targaryen blood. A dozen or so riders, 2 wagons, and a handful of armed guards who wore no sigils. Their armor was functional, bearing only minimal decoration. At their head was a woman swathed in a deep charcoal cloak, a fur mantle at her shoulders, the hood pulled low over her face. But beneath its folds, Sansa glimpsed hair that shone with a silver so pure it nearly seemed white. Servants rushed to tend to the horses. Sansa descended the steps with a regal bearing, her own cloak trailing behind her, the white wolf of House Stark gleaming. She felt the presence of her advisors flanking her, Lord Glover, Lady Manderly, and a handful of knights. She had instructed them to remain courteous. No weapons were drawn, at least not visibly. But hidden archers stood watch along the ramparts. She would not risk Winterfell on faith alone. The hooded woman dismounted. A faint hush rippled through the courtyard as she lowered her hood. Indeed, she had the look of Valyrian blood, narrow face, violet eyes, and that unmistakable pale hair. Yet she was not so reminiscent of Daenerys Targaryen as one might have expected. Her jaw was stronger and her demeanor less regal flamboyance than quiet reserve. There was a tension in her eyes, as if she too carried the weight of impossible hopes. She curtsied with a grace that spoke of noble upbringing, though there was a hint of foreign manner in her movements. Sansa stepped forward. Her voice was neither warm nor cold, but even and welcoming in the way of a queen who has nothing to prove. "Welcome to Winterfell," she said clearly. "I am Sansa Stark, Queen in the North. You have come a long way to be here. May we know your name?" The silver-haired woman inclined her head. "I was named Lena Waters in the records of Essos," she said softly, her accent gently lilting, though her common tongue was fluent. "But I was told in whispered stories that I am a daughter of Daenerys Targaryen and Baratheon-Targaryen. I make no claim to a throne. I came to Westeros in search of my blood to understand who I am and what duty I might bear." A ripple of surprise flickered across the onlookers. Even Sansa felt the subtle shock. Baratheon-Targaryen. Another name from Daenerys' time in Meereen. If this woman's claim was true, she was no true-born Targaryen according to Westerosi law, but that hardly mattered in the face of a legacy that might still stir hearts. Sansa glanced at her advisors, saw the guarded suspicion in their eyes. She turned back to Lena. "You are a guest of Winterfell. You shall have food, warmth, and shelter under our roof. Whatever you have come to say, I will hear it. We do not break guest right in the North." "Thank you, Your Grace," Lena said, her eyes flicking up to meet Sansa's. In them, Sansa saw the glimmer of relief and something else, perhaps the faint spark of an optimism that matched her own unvoiced hopes. Sansa had rooms prepared for Lena and her retinue in a secure wing of the castle under gentle guard. She made sure they were comfortable but discreetly observed. She needed to know more before trusting this potential Targaryen. And so, in the days that followed, she met with Lena in private, often accompanied by Maester Wolkan and a trusted scribe, poring over genealogical evidence, letters, and personal testimonies that Lena had carried from Essos. Lena spoke of being raised in a hidden household by those loyal to Daenerys, servants who had fled Meereen after the queen's death, taking with them an infant rumored to be the child of Daenerys and Dario. None had dared to bring the child to Westeros while the chaos of war still raged. Instead, they hid across the sea, waiting for the day it might be safe. Lena's entire life had been shaped by the burden of her parentage, or so she believed. She longed to see the land her mother had once dreamed of ruling. She wanted to know if there was a place for her in it. Sansa listened, measured each word, tested for inconsistency. She found Lena's story surprisingly coherent. The documents she carried, fragments of letters apparently penned by Baratheon-Targaryen, sealed by a sigil bearing the brazen harpy of Meereen, supported her claim. There was a reference to an infant, a plan to keep the child safe if war turned against Daenerys. More tellingly, Lena's appearance and her command of high Valyrian phrases indicated a lineage not so easily fabricated. Still, in Westeros, birth and recognition were tricky matters. Even if Lena was indeed Daenerys' daughter, she was born out of wedlock. Historically, that meant little in terms of legal claim. But the hearts of people were stirred by stories as much as by laws, and the Targaryen name carried weight in the tapestry of the realm. Sansa could not help but see reflections of Jon and Lena. Both had grown up with a complicated sense of identity. Both had discovered Targaryen blood hidden in the shadows of secrecy and war. Where Jon had fled from that lineage, Lena seemed to search for it. She did not speak of claiming the Iron Throne. Instead, she spoke of bridging the gap between Essos and Westeros, of finishing the work her mother had started in breaking chains. She acknowledged Daenerys' descent into ruthless violence, especially near the end, but believed that the dream of freeing the oppressed need not die with her. Sansa, in turn, spoke of the North scars, the decades of trauma inflicted by the wars that circled around Targaryen claims, Baratheon rebellions, and the political manipulations of the crown. They shared their burdens, though guardedly. Step by step, an unlikely understanding began to form. Lena's retinue was respectful of northern customs. They kept to their rooms mostly, exploring Winterfell's courtyard only in small groups, mindful of the watchful gazes that followed them. There was no arrogance in them that Sansa could sense, no sense of entitlement. If anything, they seemed weary, like people who had traveled long roads and wished only for a moment's reprieve. As days stretched into weeks, the North began to talk. Gossip spread among the castle staff, who whispered that the silver-haired woman was a Targaryen princess. Some scoffed, citing the tragedies wrought by the Mad King's line or the horrors of King's Landing burning under dragonfire. Others spoke in awe, remembering the dragons that had nearly retaken Westeros for Daenerys Stormborn, and wondered if more dragons might be found. Hope and fear danced side by side. One evening, Sansa and Lena walked together through the Godwood. The ancient weirwood tree stood silent, its red leaves rustling softly, the carved face gazing upon them with the solemn mystery of 1,000 years. Lanterns glowed along the path, casting warm light upon the snowy ground that had not yet fully thawed. A hush lay upon the air, save for the distant crackle of ice in the branches. "I never knew my mother," Lena said, her voice subdued, eyes on the white bark of the weirwood. "Only stories told by those who loved her, or feared her, or both. In Essos, she is still revered by many. Some believe she ascended into goddesshood when she died. Others curse her name. I grew up torn between these extremes, with no real sense of who she was." Sansa nodded gently. Many in Westeros also saw two sides of Daenerys. When she arrived, some hailed her as a liberator, breaker of chains. Others saw a conqueror who used dragons to impose her will. Jon, my brother, he tried to guide her, but in the end, he felt he had no choice but to stop her. It broke him, I think. He was never the same afterward. Lena looked down, her gloved hands clasped. "They told me she died by my uncle's hand. I suppose that is the truth of it. Yet if Jon Snow is a Targaryen by blood, then he is my uncle, though I have never met him. I wonder if he would accept me, or if he would see too much of my mother in me." Sansa let the gentle hush of the Godwood cradle her next words. "Jon is not a man who clings to hatred, but he carries guilt. If he sees her in you, it might pain him deeply. But I think that in time he would know you are your own person. It is not your place to bear the sins of your mother, nor to walk in her shadow. You have your own path." Lena nodded slowly, her violet eyes flickering in the lantern's glow. "That is what I want. My own path. But I came here because I believe we cannot walk forward without understanding the steps that brought us here. My mother, and perhaps my father, waged wars, seized thrones, shattered chains. I do not dream of war, or even of a throne. I dream of a united realm, free from the cycle of violence. If there was any chance, however faint, that Targaryen blood could help broker a true peace, I had to see if it was possible. Some of my mother's old supporters in Essos still dream of reestablishing her dynasty. I left to avoid being a puppet in their hands. But I also wonder if there is a way to harness that desire and transform it into something good, build a bridge instead of a throne." Sansa listened, her heart stirred by Lena's sincerity. She recalled how, as a girl, she had dreamed of being a queen who would wear pretty gowns and stand beside a handsome king. Now she was a queen indeed, wearing heavy cloaks and fighting to keep her people fed. The reality of power was far different than the dream. But she, too, yearned for a peace not built on fear or conquest. "The path to unity is difficult," she said softly, and Westeros is fractured still. You have seen the distrust in my lords. They worry that any Targaryen might lay claim to the realm as your mother did. But perhaps we can show them there is another way. In that quiet moment, the wind rustled the weirwood branches, and the carved face seemed almost to smile. Sansa felt an odd calmness, as if the old gods bore witness to their words. For too long, old grudges had governed the realm. Here stood a daughter of Targaryen blood, and the rightful ruler of the North, speaking not of war but of reconciliation. The memory of Bran's letter flashed through Sansa's mind. Unity is needed. Be mindful. Could it be that this was the beginning of a new age? The next day, Sansa received a raven from King's Landing. Bran's terse message confirmed that rumors of a Targaryen heir had reached every corner of the Six Kingdoms. Some lords demanded to see this heir brought before them. Others cried for her head, fearing a new dragon-led war. Yet others saw opportunity. Sansa read the letter in silence, her eyes tightening at the corners as she realized the dangerous wave rising in the south. If she did nothing, Lena might be swept up in it, used as a banner for revolt or a scapegoat to rally the frightened. The realm could unravel once more. She met with her closest advisors behind the closed doors of the Great Hall's antechamber. Lord Glover was adamant. We cannot let this Targaryen roam free in the north. If word reaches those Targaryen loyalists who remain, or the enemies who fear them, it could bring chaos to our doorstep. Lady Manderly was more tempered. If she stirs a rebellion, it won't be here in the north. There are few Targaryen loyalists among our people, but the south might see her as a threat or a prize. Sansa, we should send her to King's Landing under guard, so that King Bran can decide her fate. Sansa listened, her face unreadable. Finally she spoke, her tone quiet but iron-laced. She is our guest, and we do not send guests to uncertain fates. Neither do we imprison them without cause. If she is truly not seeking the throne, then she is a pawn in the games of those who hunger for power. In that sense, it is our responsibility to ensure no one uses her to break the peace we have fought so hard for. And how do we do that, Your Grace? Asked Lord Glover. Keep her hidden up here? The realm is already buzzing with rumor. No, said Sansa, meeting his gaze firmly. Hiding her would confirm every fear. We must bring her forward, but on our terms. We will invite representatives from each great house, from the Riverlands, from the Vale, even from Dorne. They will come here, to Winterfell, and meet Lena for themselves under our watchful eyes. We shall show them she is not a threat, but also not a puppet for their ambitions. Lord Glover looked uneasy. That's a dangerous proposition. Once they are within our walls, we risk provoking conflict. Sansa's gaze turned steely. We will not provoke it if we manage it carefully. It will be a neutral meeting, with terms agreed upon by all. We have enough goodwill from the War of the Living and from King Bran's neutrality that we can broker this gathering without it devolving into violence. The North is recognized as an independent realm, and I stand as queen. None would dare violate guest right here, knowing the consequences. We will use that to our advantage. A moment of silence passed. Then Lady Manderly inclined her head. It is a bold plan, Your Grace. If it succeeds, we might usher in a new era of cooperation. If it fails, Sansa gave a crisp nod, completing the unspoken thought. We will ensure it does not fail. And so messages were sent across Westeros once more, summoning the great and lesser lords to a grand council in Winterfell. It was unconventional. By tradition, councils were held in King's Landing or in neutral sites designated by the king. But Bran, ever inscrutable, sent his approval with little comment. Sansa could almost feel him watching from afar with that distant, seeing gaze he possessed, letting her steer the realm's fate. In the weeks that followed, an unusual procession began making its way north. Highborn lords and ladies arrived in carriages and on horseback, escorted by knights and sworn swords. The atmosphere around Winterfell grew electric, reminiscent of those rare times the North had hosted southern visitors, though never in such numbers. The courtyard bustled with arrivals, stable hands worked double time, and the great hall's kitchens roared with activity. Banners of many houses whipped in the northern wind, and the confusion of so many different allegiances under one roof stirred anxious talk among the northern folk. Yet Sansa had prepared meticulously. Rooms had been assigned, protocols established. Each lord or lady was greeted warmly, yet with the watchful courtesy that had become Winterfell's trademark. Lena Targaryen, she had begun calling herself Targaryen, dropping the name Waters kept to the background at first. Sansa advised her to remain in the private wing, shielded from prying eyes, until the formal gathering. Every day, new guests arrived, lords of the Reach, delegates from Dorne, and houses from the crownlands loyal to King Bran. Tyrion Lannister did not come, for he had long since retired from court life, but a representative from Casterly Rock appeared in his place, a distant cousin who eyed the northern scenery with caution. Representatives of the Vale, loyal to Sansa's memory as the ward of the late Lord Baelish, arrived with Lord Royce at their head. The Riverlands sent several lords who had pledged direct fealty to King Bran, unsure how this northern council would reshape things. Tension hung in the air like a sword balanced on its edge. On the appointed day, the great hall of Winterfell stood draped in the standards of all attending houses, lined in a row so that none could claim precedence. The Stark banner with its grey dire wolf still hung at the head, for it was their seat, but Sansa had taken great care not to place the Stark sigil in an overtly dominant position. Long tables were arranged so each delegation could sit facing the dais where Sansa would preside. To maintain neutrality, none were seated above or below the rest. An uneasy hush settled as all realized they stood at the brink of a new political tide. Sansa entered in her regal leathers and cloak trimmed with snowy fur. Her auburn hair, neatly braided, framed a face calm yet resolute. She did not smile, but her tone was respectful as she welcomed them. She explained the purpose, to address the claims of a purported Targaryen heir named Lena, to determine her place in Westeros and to ensure stability and peace among the realms. Murmurs echoed. Whispers of doubt and suspicion. A Targaryen? Another pretender? Some lords shifted, eyes flickering across the hall. But none dared speak openly against Sansa. She was well respected and none could forget her pivotal role in defeating the Night King and helping secure the North's freedom. When Sansa finally signaled, the massive doors opened. Lena entered, flanked by two of her associate guards, wearing a gown of deep gray with a subtle hint of red in its thread, an understated nod to House Targaryen's colors. Her silver hair was braided back elegantly, exposing her pale features and violet eyes. A quiet ripple of curiosity traveled through the hall. Those who had never seen a Valyrian-featured individual before watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Sansa took a breath, sensing the tension. She gestured to Lena. I present to you Lena, daughter of Daenerys Targaryen and Dario Naharis, by her own account. She does not come to claim the Iron Throne or to sow discord. She comes seeking her rightful place in the realm of her ancestors. I have seen her proof, listened to her story, and found no attempt at deceit. But each of you must judge for yourselves, for that is why you were called here. Lena stepped forward. Her voice was low but carried, surprisingly steady. My lords and ladies, I know what my mother did, both the good and the ill. I neither apologize for her nor condemn her, for I never knew her. I can only say that I do not seek to rule over you. I came to learn of Westeros and to see if there is a place for me here. If my lineage can help heal old wounds, I would do all in my power to see it done. If, however, my presence brings only turmoil, I will leave these shores and return to Essos. I ask for your fair hearing. A council was formed with Sansa presiding. Each house or delegation had a chance to speak. Some demanded more evidence. Lena provided letters, testimony from her retinue, proof of her knowledge of Targaryen family traditions. She even spoke in High Valyrian, enough to convince those present that she had indeed been raised among those who had knowledge of the old dynasty. There were calls for King Bran's judgment. But a royal proclamation from King Bran had arrived by Raven, stating that he trusted the Queen in the north to oversee the matter with wisdom and fairness. This caused some consternation among the lords who had hoped for a swift condemnation or endorsement from the king. With Bran's neutrality established, the matter lay firmly in Sansa's hands. It was not a quick proceeding. Over several days, positions formed and lines were drawn. Some lords saw Lena as an opportunity. If they could rally her behind their grievances, they might force changes at King's Landing or carve out new powers for themselves. Others saw her as a threat, a living symbol that might rouse rebellion in the name of House Targaryen. Only a few, like Sansa, saw her as a chance at genuine cooperation, a living bridge between the North and South, between the old Targaryen rule and the new post-war realm. Sansa maneuvered carefully, using her sharp political instincts to foster trust. She orchestrated private meetings, guided discussions, and allowed Lena to speak for herself whenever possible, trusting her forthright nature to disarm suspicions. As the days wore on, something remarkable began to happen. Lena spent time speaking not just to lords, but to their attendants, to knights, to maesters, to servants. Word spread that she was gentle, curious, and more interested in hearing others' stories than telling her own. She formed a bond with a young man from House Tarly who had studied dragon lore, exchanging knowledge about old Valyria. She met a maester from the Vale who was chronicling the Great War and offered accounts she had heard from her guardians in Essos. Gradually, the hostility in Winterfell's halls thawed, replaced by a cautious, budding acceptance. Sansa watched it all with a hopeful heart, remembering how Daenerys herself had once struggled to gain allies, only to be undone by fear and betrayal. She prayed this time would be different. At last, the council was prepared to cast its consensus, or at least produce a statement of acceptance or denial. Lords and ladies gathered in the great hall once more. A hush fell as Sansa stood, her gaze traveling over those assembled. "We have heard the claims of Lena Targaryen," she began. "We have examined her evidence. We have observed her conduct. Now we must decide if she is to be recognized as a Targaryen by right, and what place she shall hold in Westeros. The decision is ours to make, but remember that we do so not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. If we declare her a pariah, we risk fueling a conflict that may smolder and erupt when we least expect it. If we anoint her a princess, we risk inflaming old resentments. We walk a fine line. I say there is a middle path. Recognize her name, but do not elevate it to a throne. Acknowledge her blood, but do not hold it above others. Let her be a link between houses and kingdoms, an ambassador of goodwill. The Targaryen name is too important to be denied, yet too fraught to be thrust into power. Let us let her be who she claims to be, a daughter seeking her rightful place among us." Murmurs ran through the hall. Some nodded in agreement, relieved by Sansa's balanced stance. Others looked uncertain. One of the lords from the Crownlands, Lord Rosby, stood. "How can we be certain she will not rally traitors? The Targaryen name is powerful, and we have not forgotten the flames that consumed King's Landing. Could she not be a weapon in the wrong hands?" Lena herself answered, her voice calm. "I cannot swear that no one in Westeros or Essos will seek to use me, but I can swear that I will not let them. If I wanted to incite rebellion, I would have arrived with an army at my back. I have come only with loyal companions, under the protection of Queen Sansa. My life is in your hands as much as you fear I hold your futures in mine. I only ask that we walk forward together." A silence followed. Then Lord Royce of the Vale broke it with measured words. "I have spoken with her. She carries no illusions of conquest. If House Stark trusts her, the Vale will trust her. We have fought too many wars. Let us not condemn someone for the name they bear. She has proven no threat thus far." Others voiced similar sentiments. Those who opposed remained, but their voices were fewer. The tide of the council, carefully steered by Sansa, turned in Lena's favor. And so it was decided. Lena Targaryen was acknowledged publicly as Daenerys' daughter, an aristocrat of Westeros, but she would not be styled princess or hold claims to any seat. She would serve as a ward under House Stark's protection for 1 year, until the realm grew accustomed to her presence. Then she would be free to seek her own holdings or remain in the north if she wished. Most importantly, the major houses signed a pact not to raise arms under her name or to condemn her without just cause. It was not an official royal decree, for that would be King Bran's prerogative, but it was a recognized and binding agreement among the leading families and their representatives. The sense of relief in the Great Hall was palpable. As the delegates departed over the following days, many left with subdued gratitude as though they had collectively sidestepped a potential catastrophe. Sansa received letters from some lords praising her wisdom, others privately grumbling that they had no reason to host a Targaryen. But the realm seemed, for the moment, at peace. And in Winterfell, Lena Targaryen found something she had never had before, a home, or at least the beginnings of one. With that immediate crisis settled, life at Winterfell settled into a more predictable rhythm. Laughter once again echoed in the halls, especially among the younger squires and ladies-in-waiting. Lena spent her days learning northern customs, forging connections, riding through the surrounding lands. She accompanied Sansa to the villages, seeing firsthand the struggles of the small folk who had endured the harsh winter and the aftermath of war. She assisted in distributing supplies and took note of their troubles. Quietly, almost without Sansa's noticing, she began to take on small tasks of governance, listening to disputes, helping to negotiate with traveling merchants. Her natural empathy and gentle manner won her admirers. When she spoke to them in her soft accent, they found they could confide in her. Even the northern lords, once suspicious, admitted that the presence of a Targaryen ward in Winterfell did no harm and might encourage more trade relations with Essos in the future. As the weeks passed, Sansa came to see Lena not just as a political ally but as a friend. It was a cautious friendship at first, marked by the weight of their respective histories. But shared dinners turned into long conversations that stretched into the night. They spoke of womanhood, of burdens, of leadership, of the heartbreak each had suffered in different ways. Sansa found in Lena a mirror of her own younger self, someone shaped by forces beyond her control, longing for a sense of belonging and a chance to do good. Lena found in Sansa the unwavering strength she had always sought, a figure who had endured cruelty and yet remained gracious and wise. It was on one such late evening in Sansa's solar, while sipping mulled wine, that Lena asked quietly, "You have given me more kindness than I ever expected, Your Grace." "I am grateful. But I wonder, do you truly believe the realm can ever be united after everything that has happened? Or are we just chasing a dream that died with the dragons?" Sansa set her cup down, her voice thoughtful. "I used to believe the realm was a grand tapestry torn by war and lies. Now I see it more as a garden grown over with weeds of distrust. We can pull the weeds, sow new seeds, and water them well, but the process is slow. Sometimes it seems impossible. Yet I have witnessed wonders, Starks riding with Targaryens, wildlings fighting alongside men of the south, and the living uniting against the dead. If that can happen, then I believe unity can take root if we are patient and persistent." Lena's gaze lowered, a faint smile touching her lips. "Perhaps you are right. In Essos I saw what my mother left behind. Many freedmen revered her, but the city-states quickly fell back into old patterns once she sailed away. Change that is forced can be undone. True change must be nurtured from within. Maybe that is the lesson I was meant to learn before ever coming here." Sansa reached across the table, gently clasping Lena's hand. "Whatever future we build, it will be a patient, steady process. And we will need every ally we can find. Would you stand with me, Lena, if the time came to choose between the North and those who would misuse your name for power?" Lena met her eyes, and there was a fierce sincerity in her face. "I will stand with you. And with House Stark. You have my word." It was a promise that would shape their destinies in ways neither fully grasped in that moment. For though the lords had left Winterfell and the immediate crisis had eased, rumors spread quickly across land and sea. In the free cities of Essos, certain factions that still worshipped the memory of Daenerys Targaryen began to stir at the news of her daughter's acceptance in Westeros. Funding and arms were gathered by those who believed a Targaryen restoration was within reach. Spies were dispatched to learn more, to discover if this Lena Targaryen was indeed the living symbol they had hoped for. And in Westeros itself, murmurs persisted that dragons might one day return. After all, did Daenerys not hatch 3 eggs from stone? Did they not live and die in the skies of war? Some whispered of hidden clutches of eggs, rumored to have been secreted away when Daenerys marched on King's Landing. Others spoke of new Alusi. But the faintest rumor that a Targaryen walked the land again was enough to awaken old hopes and old fears alike. Sansa sensed the shifting winds. She saw the letters from Bravos, from Pentos, from Volantis, all seeking to establish contact or alliances. She watched the sudden interest in northern trade that might expand the port at White Harbor. She heard, too, from King Bran, who sent a raven. Times change. Alliances shift. The night of war must not fall again. Remember who you are, and remember that your choices shape tomorrow. She carried that raven's words with her as she went about her duties, conscious that a reckoning might come sooner than she or Lena anticipated. But for now, Winterfell's walls stood secure, warmed by hearth fires and overshadowed by the watchful heart tree. And in those halls, 2 women shared an impossible bond: Sansa Stark, the queen in the north, and Lena Targaryen, the rumored last scion of Daenerys Stormborn, standing together at the edge of a new era. Yet the North was not the only place where the seeds of change found fertile ground. In King's Landing, the boy King Aegon, once called Gendry Baratheon's ward, listened to rumors with wide eyes, enthralled by tales of Targaryen glory. In Dorne, the ruling princess weighed the chance to assert independence anew or throw her support behind a potential Targaryen union. In the Iron Islands, the Pike Lords saw potential for raiding or forging a beneficial pact, whichever served them best. Letters traveled fast, but decisions were slower. Sansa's bold step in uniting House Stark with this fledgling Targaryen woman had shaken the realm's quiet equilibrium. Within the stony walls of Winterfell, however, Daily life resumed a semblance of peace. Sansa and Lena rode together through the vast northern countryside, visiting distant holdfasts to show that the daughter of Daenerys Targaryen was not a vengeful conqueror but a curious, benevolent presence. Lena adapted to the northern cold, wearing furs and sturdy boots, her silver hair sometimes hidden under a hood. She marveled at the stark beauty of the land, the crisp air that bit at her cheeks, the wolves that howled in the night. The people grew used to her presence, and children, seeing her silver locks, sometimes called her the Dragon Lady. With innocent admiration, Sansa recognized how the small folks' acceptance could serve as a model for the rest of Westeros. If the pragmatic, often suspicious northerners could grow to accept a Targaryen in their midst, perhaps the rest of the realm might follow. She began to outline a more formal alliance, a marriage perhaps, not for herself but for Lena. It was an old tradition, uniting houses through marriage to seal a bond. Sansa considered which lords might be suitable, but she did not wish to force Lena into a union. So she put the idea aside for the moment, focusing instead on ensuring that the North's alliance with the Targaryen name bore fruit in trade, cultural exchange, and deeper trust. Still, the question lingered in her mind, could the union of Stark and Targaryen be made more literal, binding their houses in a way that might symbolize the forging of a new era for Westeros? Jon was lost beyond the wall, unlikely to return. Bran was king with no interest in marriage. Arya was gone. That left few who could fulfill such a role. Perhaps a nephew or cousin. Or perhaps an entirely different approach. The notion of an official betrothal hovered as an option, but Sansa refused to reduce Lena to a mere political tool. She remembered too well what it was like to be bartered away. One night, as snow drifted gently outside, Sansa found herself in the Winterfell library reading an ancient volume on the history of House Targaryen. She had read it before, many times, but she was searching for insight, some clue about how the Targaryens once claimed to forge unity by binding the realm in fire and blood. It struck her that a new Targaryen might truly do the opposite, bind the realm by showing restraint, compassion, and cooperation. She closed the book and gazed into the flickering candlelight, remembering how she had once believed in the ideal of a queen who brought everyone together with grace and wisdom. Reality had taught her that ruling required cunning, strength, and sometimes harsh decisions. But she had also learned that alliances built on trust were stronger than those built on fear. She rose from her seat, walked to the window, and looked out over the courtyard. The moonlight cast a silver glow on the stones, and for a moment she thought she saw a shadow pass, a fleeting shape overhead as if a dragon soared through the pale night sky. She blinked and it was gone. Perhaps just a cloud skimming the moon. Yet her heart quickened. If, by some impossible chance, a dragon egg still existed, if a living dragon could be born again, how would the realm react? Another wave of fear, or a wave of wonder? She could almost hear the old gods whisper in the rustling branches of the godwood, the future is coming. The realm shifts. Are you ready, Sansa Stark, to shape it? She knew the answer. She had been shaped by cruelty and loss, but she had come out tempered and unwavering. She was the wolf who survived the storm. And now she would stand side by side with a Targaryen who sought peace, forging an alliance that might just unite the 7 kingdoms, or 6, counting the North's independence, in a way no one had dared to imagine since the earliest days of Aegon the Conqueror. Across the hall in her private chambers, Lena Targaryen stood at her window too, gazing at the same moonlit sky. She thought of her mother, her father, and the city of Meereen under a hot sun. She thought of the children she had seen in the northern villages. The farmers who bowed to her not because they feared her name, but because they were grateful for her compassion. She whispered softly, a vow to the mother she never knew. I will not be you, but I will carry forth what was good in you. Let the dragons rest, let the wolves run free. We must be better than the wars that forged us. Thus, though few beyond Winterfell's walls could sense it, a new era was dawning. One where House Stark and House Targaryen stood side by side, not as conqueror and wardens, but as partners, forging bonds of trust instead of chains of subjugation. The North had welcomed a Targaryen into its heart, and in doing so, lit a beacon for all of Westeros to see. If these ancient houses could find harmony, perhaps the realm might yet know unity without the taste of blood and fire. They were, both of them, just beginning. Journeys lay ahead, some to distant corners of Essos, where Targaryen loyalists might dream of lighting the skies with dragonflame again. Some to King's Landing, where a mysterious king with far-seeing eyes watched the world with a calm beyond mortal men. And some to lands unknown, where the children of the forest once walked, and where magic might still stir. But in the hush of winter's night, with the moon bright above the battlements, it was enough to stand together, two women bound by a shared dream, that the realm, torn and battered, might yet heal and rise stronger than before, not beneath the shadow of dragons or the howling of wolves alone, but in a quiet promise of union. And in that promise, House Stark and House Targaryen began a new chapter in the endless story of Westeros. One not written in conquest, but in collaboration, guided by the lessons of the past, and woven by the hopeful hands of those who refused to let the fires of vengeance consume the possibility of peace. The soft hush of late winter settled over Winterfell like a long, slow exhalation. Though the days had begun to lengthen and the sharpest edge of the cold had dulled, there remained a chill that crept around corners and lingered in every shaded patch of snow. Twilight cast a pale purple glow across the courtyard, and a small handful of staff lit torches in sconces, their flames winking against the encroaching dark. Inside the great keep, Sansa Stark walked slowly through the corridors, her steps echoing on the stone floors polished by centuries of tread. She held a letter in her hand, the wax seal broken, the paper trembling slightly with the weight of what it contained. Word had come from the other side of the narrow sea. Certain factions in Meereen, Yunkai, and Volantis whispered of raising armies in the name of the new Targaryen. The merchant who sent this raven did so in covert fashion, warning Sansa that the movement was not large yet, but might grow if unchecked. The people calling themselves the Children of the Dragon believed Daenerys's daughter to be a prophesied figure who would restore the full Targaryen legacy, perhaps even surpassing what Daenerys had attempted. The letter spoke of secret gatherings, the forging of steel weapons, and the hopeful rumor that new dragon eggs had been found in some lost vault. None of it was confirmed, but even the merest whisper of dragons was enough to set men's hearts ablaze with wonder or terror. Sansa's eyes drifted shut for a moment as she stood in a side passage, leaning against the wall. If any of this gained momentum, it could spur chaos in Westeros, no matter how sincerely Lena Targaryen disavowed the notion of conquest. Fear was a fickle and potent force. For so long, Sansa had struggled to protect the North from southern ambitions, from White Walkers, from the Lannisters, from the Boltons. Now she found herself trying to protect the realm from a threat that had not even fully formed yet, but which she could sense lurking in the corners of men's minds. She took a steadying breath, folded the letter, and made her way toward Lena's chambers. Lena's quarters had once belonged to Lady Catelyn Tully back when Sansa's mother was mistress of Winterfell. They were comfortable, with a window that overlooked the courtyard and a door that led to a small antechamber for private meetings. When Sansa knocked, a soft voice bade her enter. Inside, Lena was seated at a table strewn with papers, books on the history of the Seven Kingdoms, and a map of Essos pinned with tiny wooden markers. She looked up, a line of concentration creasing her brow. Over the past few months, she had embraced her role as a learner, immersing herself in the realm's history, politics, and economics, trying to understand all she could about the land her mother had died trying to free or conquer, depending on one's perspective. Sansa approached, handing her the letter with a grave expression. This came from one of our contacts across the sea. I think you should read it yourself. Lena took it and scanned the contents, her violet eyes flickering with concern. She set it aside with a deliberate movement, pressing her lips together. I suspected something like this might happen eventually, she said quietly. My mother's memory still burns brightly for many people in Essos. Those who believed in her might see me as a second chance. They don't care about the cost or whether I even want that role. Sansa laid a hand gently on Lena's shoulder. We can't let them turn you into a banner for more war. But if they raise forces in your name, even if you don't command them to, the realm might blame you. Especially those who still fear Targaryen power. Lena exhaled, setting both hands on the table as though to steady herself. Then we must find a way to show Westeros and Essos that I stand for cooperation, not conquest. Is there a way to get ahead of this? To speak out, perhaps in King's Landing, or even beyond the Narrow Sea, to denounce any attempts to raise armies in my name. Sansa walked around the table, considering. Words alone may not be enough if people truly believe you to be a messianic figure. But it's a start. There is also a risk in traveling openly. If you appear in a public forum, you could attract zealots who want to flock to your side or enemies who see you as a threat. Lena's mouth pressed into a thin line. Hiding away in Winterfell won't solve the problem either. Rumors will grow if I remain a mystery. Perhaps a more direct approach is needed. I could travel to Essos myself, speak in the cities where these rumors have begun. But doing so would put me at risk and might make me look like I'm courting them. Sansa nodded. That's exactly the dilemma. But we can't ignore it. If these children of the dragon are truly arming themselves, they could sail west one day, seeking to install you on a throne you've never claimed. Westeros must know where you stand long before that happens. Lena looked up, a spark in her gaze. You once told me that the greatest challenge in politics is not forcing people to do what you want, but persuading them that it's in their best interest. We need a demonstration, something that shows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I am not here to conquer. Perhaps an alliance or a symbolic act so strong that no rumor can override it. Something akin to how King Aegon once united the realm by fire, except we do the opposite. Unity through cooperation. Sansa considered this, arms folded over her chest. A formal betrothal would be such a symbol in the eyes of many. Marriages between houses have shaped the realm's destiny for centuries. But I told you before I wouldn't force such a thing on you. It was done to me more times than I care to count. Lena gave a small, appreciative smile. I know, and I am grateful for your respect. But if the alternative is war, I would consider a marriage that helps cement stability, provided it is with someone honorable and provided I am given the choice. Sansa glanced at her thoughtfully. You truly would consider it? Lena took a moment to reflect. I would. But who would it be? Jon is gone. Bran is king, but she trailed off, shaking her head. He's not likely to marry anyone, let alone me. Others might see a Targaryen bride as a chance to elevate themselves, or they might see it as a threat. Sansa walked over to the window, looking out at the courtyard where dusk was deepening into night. We could consider a highborn son of one of the great houses, someone from the north, or possibly the Vale, or the Riverlands. But to be frank, none hold enough symbolic weight to truly unify the realm. The Targaryen name is bigger than any single region. We need a bond so strong it resonates with every corner of Westeros. Lena frowned. Then the only name that comes to mind is Baratheon or maybe Tyrell. Although House Tyrell is effectively gone. The Baratheons were once kin to the Targaryens, weren't they? Through Aegon's half-brother, if the histories are to be believed. Sansa nodded. Yes, centuries ago. And Gendry Baratheon was legitimized by Queen Daenerys herself, although not formally documented in a way that Westeros widely acknowledged. Still, he's recognized now as Lord of Storm's End, but he has no royal standing. Even so, a Baratheon-Targaryen union might stir old tales of connected bloodlines, bridging the history of Robert's rebellion, though that ended in Targaryen bloodshed. She sighed. But Gendry himself. I do not know if he's even open to such an arrangement. The last I heard, he had grown comfortable in the Stormlands, focusing on building up his seat. And how would you feel about it? Lena's expression was pensive. I don't know him. I only know the stories, that he helped fight the Night King, that he was a blacksmith's apprentice, that Daenerys acknowledged him as a Baratheon. I suppose we could reach out. But does he wield enough influence to quell these Essosi factions? Or is there a more suitable candidate? Sansa considered. Gendry has been building alliances in the Crownlands and the Stormlands. He's well-liked, seen as a humble and somewhat heroic figure. That might not stop zealots across the sea, but if you married the Lord of Storm's End, you'd be deeply tied to Westeros's power structure. And more importantly, it would show you are not setting yourself up as a separate sovereign. You'd be uniting your Targaryen heritage with the same house that once overthrew Targaryen rule. Symbolically, that might be potent enough to calm the realm's nerves and prove to Essos that you aren't interested in a Targaryen restoration that sets you on the Iron Throne. Lena inhaled slowly. It's a lot to consider. But if it might prevent war, I would at least be willing to meet him. Sansa gave a slow nod. I'll send a raven to Storm's End. We can make it an invitation for him to come north or for us to meet at a neutral location. But first, I want to speak to King Bran. If there's any man who might see all angles of this, it's him. Lena managed a small, appreciative smile. Thank you, Sansa. I trust your guidance. And I want you to know if this idea doesn't work or if Gendry isn't the right path, I'll keep searching for another way to show my intentions. I have no love for forced marriages. Sansa reached out, briefly clasping Lena's hands. You'll have a choice. I promise. Then she squeezed gently, letting go, and departed. That same evening, Sansa penned a long letter to Bran. Though she knew her brother's answers tended to be cryptic, she still valued his insight. She described the news from Essos, the potential for conflict, and the notion of a betrothal. Then, in the privacy of her room, she recalled how Bran had once said that everything in the present was shaped by the past and the future alike, as though time was woven in ways no ordinary mind could grasp. She wondered what thoughts would form in the king's mind when he learned of her plan. The raven departed at dawn, its sleek wings flapping in the cold northern sky. Sansa busied herself for the next few days, managing the affairs of Winterfell, arranging shipments of grain to smaller holdfasts that were still recovering from the extended winters, and dealing with small matters of justice among the local lords. Lena assisted, sitting in on petitions, observing how disputes were resolved. It was a quiet existence that belied the tension simmering beneath. After 5 days, a raven returned from King's Landing. The note was short, in Bran's neat handwriting. Do what you must. The storm needs calm. Unite as you see fit, but remember that each choice creates new consequences. I believe in you, my sister. Beneath it was the seal of the three-eyed raven, which Bran sometimes used in lieu of the traditional royal stamp, an unsettling symbol that reminded everyone of his strange wisdom. Sansa read it and let out a slow breath. That was as close to approval as she was likely to get from Bran. So be it. She sent out another letter immediately, this one to Storm's End, requesting an audience with Lord Gendry Baratheon or an emissary of his choosing, to discuss a matter of great importance that concerned both the North and the future of the realm. She worded it carefully, omitting direct references to Lena or marriage, but making it clear that a substantial opportunity was at stake. A week passed, and a swift messenger, faster than any raven, arrived from Storm's End. He brought a single piece of parchment bearing Gendry's seal. Yes, he would come, accompanied by a small retinue. He proposed they meet halfway at Harrenhal, a location large enough to accommodate delegations and neutral enough not to tilt the meeting in favor of either the North or the Stormlands. Sansa considered the possibility of hosting him in Winterfell, but Harrenhal's central location would save time and travel strain, especially in early spring when roads were still muddy and uncertain. She accepted. Before they departed, Sansa arranged for a suitable escort. She handpicked a small group of knights and guards loyal to House Stark, including a few of her most trusted advisors. Lena would accompany them, of course, though Sansa insisted on caution. Traveling with Lena publicly was not as dangerous as it might have been in the immediate aftermath of Daenerys's death, but there were still those who harbored grudges or saw advantage in kidnapping a Targaryen, especially one rumored to be forging alliances. On a misty morning, they set out from Winterfell. The retinue included several wagons of supplies. Sansa had learned from years of war that traveling light was wise, but so was preparing for the unexpected. Riding beside the wagons were a dozen mounted guards, their armor emblazoned with the dire wolf of House Stark. Sansa rode near the front, her cloak trimmed in white fur, while Lena rode slightly behind her, wrapped in a dark cloak with a hood that concealed her silver hair from casual onlookers. The journey south was uneventful at first. They passed small villages where people recognized Queen Sansa, bowing or curtsying as she rode by, often offering timid smiles when they glimpsed Lena's unusual coloring. But the rumors about a Targaryen traveling with the Queen in the north had circulated enough that people were less frightened and more curious. The roads were muddy, the rivers were swollen from snowmelt, and progress was slow. As the caravan wound its way through the neck and into the riverlands, the land began to show signs of early spring. Buds on the trees, green shoots poking through the damp soil, birds calling in the marshes. Sansa felt the subtle relief of seeing the world thaw after so much darkness. Every few days, they stopped at small inns or at the seats of local lords who were loyal to the Starks or friendly to them. Courtesies were exchanged, and Lena often asked to walk among the common folk, hearing their concerns. Sansa granted these requests whenever she deemed it safe, watching with careful eyes how Lena interacted. Each time, the Targaryen woman displayed a gentle empathy, asking farmers about their crops, listening to mothers worried about the cost of bread. Sansa noticed how naturally she stepped into a role of quiet leadership, offering no grand promises but providing a sympathetic ear. It reminded Sansa of how she had grown into her own role, reluctantly at first, but with steadfast resolve once she accepted that helping her people was her duty. They drew closer to Harrenhal, whose silhouette loomed on the horizon one afternoon in the shape of towering blackened spires. Even in ruin, the castle was a colossus, its fused stone walls twisted by dragonfire long ago. The great fortress had changed hands countless times in history and carried a reputation for ill luck. Yet it remained a strategic and imposing place, large enough to host royal gatherings or armies needing quarter. Now, it served as a neutral ground for the meeting with Gendry Baratheon. Sansa felt a chill run through her as they approached the massive gates, though it was not caused by the wind. The dark legends of Harrenhal weighed heavily on the air. Ash still smeared the stones in places, the legacy of Aegon the Conqueror's dragons centuries past. She thought of how the Targaryen dynasty was once forged in fire at this very site, how Harren the Black and his kin had burned alive in their towering spires. Now another Targaryen was arriving unarmed and seeking a different kind of destiny. It was a stark reminder of how history could both repeat and transform. Lord Gendry Baratheon had arrived before them. His banner, a crowned black stag on a field of gold, flew over one of the massive courtyards. An honor guard of Baratheon knights stood at attention near the main entrance. As Sansa and her retinue passed under the colossal archway, she spotted Gendry himself waiting, clad in practical leather and steel, his dark hair shorter than she remembered from her youth. He had a robust, muscular build, and though the Baratheon sigil was stitched over his doublet, Sansa could still see something of the blacksmith's apprentice in his stance, feet planted firmly, shoulders set in a way that suggested he was prepared for anything. He bowed with a courteous but unpolished movement as Sansa dismounted. "Your Grace," he said, his voice resonating in the vast courtyard. "It's been many years." Sansa inclined her head. "Lord Baratheon, thank you for meeting me on such short notice." His gaze flicked to Lena and curiosity flashed in his eyes. "I imagine it's an important matter to bring you all this way." Sansa gave him a small smile. "One that concerns the future of Westeros. May we speak in private?" He nodded, gesturing to an entrance that led into the vast, winding corridors of Harrenhal's keep. "I've prepared chambers suitable for a queen, though I doubt any place in these ruins can match Winterfell's comfort. Still, the walls are sturdy enough." They walked inside. The interior of Harrenhal remained somber and imposing, the halls lit by tall iron sconces. Though partially ruined, sections of the fortress had been restored for occasional usage by passing lords. Gendry led them to a chamber with a heavy oaken table in the center and chairs arranged around it. A large hearth crackled on one side, attempting to dispel the persistent chill that crept through the stone floors. Once their attendants had checked the space for safety, Sansa, Lena, and Gendry took seats at the table. A handful of trusted guards lingered by the walls at a respectful distance. Sansa wasted no time with idle pleasantries. "You may have heard rumors of a Targaryen heir in the north. Lord Gendry, I'd like to introduce you formally to Lena Targaryen, daughter of Daenerys Stormborn and Daario Naharis." She gestured to Lena, who inclined her head politely. Gendry's brows rose slightly. "The rumors I've heard have been contradictory, but I can see your resemblance to Daenerys." He spoke with subdued courtesy, but his gaze held caution. "Your mother legitimized me as a Baratheon, though it was in the last days before the siege on King's Landing. I never had the chance to speak with her again after the war ended." Lena nodded. "I know, and I do not claim to speak for her legacy now. But I will say I'm grateful for her recognizing you, as it allowed the Stormlands to have a true Baratheon once more." His guarded expression softened slightly. "It wasn't an easy road. Many questioned my right to Storm's End. But in time, most recognized that it was better to have a Baratheon, and Robert's blood runs through my veins after all than to keep the seat unclaimed." Sansa drew in a breath. "Lord Gendry, the reason I asked you here is that we face a potential crisis. Across the narrow sea, some loyalists of House Targaryen are mobilizing in Lena's name, thinking to continue what Daenerys began. She wants no part of conquest, but words alone may not deter them. We seek a way to unify Westeros against such a threat, one that does not involve swords or dragons, but rather a symbolic union so strong that no one can doubt where Lena's loyalties lie." Gendry's eyes shifted from Sansa to Lena and back again. "I see. So you're suggesting marriage, I presume?" Lena exhaled. "It's an idea, not a demand. The union of Baratheon and Targaryen blood would be an immense statement to the realm that old enmities can be mended, that the Targaryen line is not seeking to claim the throne. It would also unify the Stormlands with the North in alliance, bridging a wide gap." Gendry was silent for a time, his eyes lingering on the flames in the hearth. Then he turned to Sansa. "I remember when you were forced into betrothals, Sansa. I'd hate to see you force that on anyone else. Are you both sure this is what you want?" Sansa's cheeks flushed slightly at the mention of her past. She kept her voice level. "Nothing is forced here, Gendry. If Lena is not willing, or if you are not willing, we'll find another way. But from where I stand, this marriage could be the difference between peace and another war." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "A union of Baratheon and Targaryen. That would be a powerful symbol indeed. I was always taught that Robert's rebellion began because of Rhaegar Targaryen's actions at the Trident and because my father loved Lyanna Stark. It's ironic to think we could unite the lines that once bled each other dry. But if it truly helps protect the realm from another war, I'd be a fool not to consider it. Lena offered a gentle smile. I don't want to be a cause for more bloodshed. If this is a way to prevent it, I'm willing. But I'd like the chance to get to know you if we are to be bound for life. Gendry let out a short laugh, not unkind. That sounds reasonable. It's been a long time since I considered any prospects for marriage. Storm's End occupies most of my time. And truth be told, I'm more comfortable in a forge than a grand hall. But I do understand duty. Sansa leaned forward slightly. We could arrange a period of courtship, a few weeks or months, so that you may see if this is truly a path you both can accept. We can host you either in Winterfell or perhaps you'd prefer the Stormlands. It would give the realm time to prepare, and it would show the people that this is not a hasty arrangement. Gendry nodded. I'd appreciate that. Storm's End might be warmer, especially if the weather stays cool up here. But I'm also amenable to traveling to Winterfell if you prefer. If we split the time between both seats, that might be fairest. Lena spoke up, her voice calm. I've seen a great deal of the North these past months. Perhaps it's time I learned more about the Stormlands and you. His gaze met hers. There was a hesitant curiosity there, a flicker of genuine interest. Then you'd be welcome at Storm's End. I'll see to it that you have every comfort we can provide. He glanced at Sansa, then back at Lena. If after this courtship we decide we're not suited, I'll stand by your cause in another way. I won't let the realm descend into chaos, Targaryen or not. Sansa's shoulders relaxed slightly. This was going better than she could have hoped. Thank you, Gendry. I trust you won't regret this decision. He stood, gesturing to the surrounding keep. You've traveled a long way. The steward of Harrenhal has prepared rooms. Rest for the night. Let's dine together, talk further. Tomorrow, we can set off for Storm's End if that pleases you. They agreed, and before long, Sansa found herself in a suite of rooms that overlooked a desolate courtyard, the ruined towers of Harrenhal soaring beyond. She washed the dust of travel from her hands, changed into a warm gown, and spent a moment gazing from the window. The black stones of the castle, scorched by dragonfire so long ago, seemed to brood in the evening light. She wondered if these walls could sense that another Targaryen was here now, walking among them peacefully. It felt like a tenuous shift in the tapestry of history, as if the ghosts of the past hovered on the edges, uncertain how to react. That night, they dined in a smaller hall. Gendry had brought a few of his advisors, while Sansa brought hers. Lena was present, of course, and the conversation was largely polite, centered on matters of trade and local politics. Gendry spoke of rebuilding roads in the Stormlands, fostering better relations with King's Landing, and how he supported King Bran's measured approach to governance. He asked Lena about her life in Essos, and she recounted the few memories she had of Meereen, mainly stories told to her by her guardians, how the freed people there still revered Daenerys, though many also feared that the city could slip back into old ways without a strong hand. She carefully omitted the details of certain loyalist factions not wanting to linger on the specter of war. But the subtext was clear enough. When the meal ended, Sansa felt a subdued sense of optimism. Gendry seemed open-minded, neither too eager to exploit Lena's name nor too intimidated by it. For her part, Lena appeared comfortable speaking with him, sharing mild jokes about the architectural differences between Storm's End and the pyramids of Meereen. Still, Sansa sensed a current of uncertainty beneath it all. The notion of a politically arranged marriage could not be taken lightly, no matter how amicable they might be over dinner. Early the next morning, they prepared to ride for the Stormlands. Harrenhal's steward, a man named Rusk, bowed them out with a vague expression of relief, as though he was glad to see them depart. Perhaps he worried about the cursed reputation of the place. The combined retinue set out under cloudy skies, traveling southeast along the King's Road before turning toward the storm-lashed coasts. Along the way, Sansa observed Gendry and Lena riding together on occasion, exchanging quiet conversation. She refrained from interfering, wanting them to find their own rhythm. Sometimes they rode in silence, each lost in thought, but there was no apparent tension, just the sense of two people trying to discover if they could build a future together. As they progressed deeper into the Stormlands, the air grew humid, the forests dense with tall evergreens and moss-covered trunks. The sky often wore a mantle of slate-gray clouds, and wind whipped through the trees. Occasional bursts of rain spattered the procession, forcing them to pull up hoods or seek shelter in wayside inns. Sansa had almost forgotten the wild energy of this region, so different from the austere north or the more placid fields of the Riverlands. Here, thunder rumbled like a distant drummer, and lightning sometimes carved white scars in the sky. Storm's End rose on the horizon after nearly a fortnight of travel. Its ancient walls, thick and round, were designed to resist the pounding of storms off the narrow sea. Gendry led the way proudly, pointing out improvements he had made: new battlements under repair, a rebuilt stable block, a small workshop near the walls where blacksmiths worked. Sansa noticed that while Storm's End might not have the grandeur of the Red Keep or Highgarden back when Highgarden stood in its full glory, it had a robust solidity, a fortress that withstood the worst the sea and sky could hurl at it. She admired that. The North had its own brand of harshness, but the storms of these coasts were said to be fierce beyond compare. They entered the courtyard, hoofs clattering on stone, guards saluting. The Baratheon banners snapped in the gusting wind, and servants bustled forward to assist with the horses and unload wagons. Sansa caught a glimpse of the sea beyond the walls, churning under a gunmetal sky. Salt tinged the air. She felt a slight thrill, remembering her youth when she had so rarely left Winterfell. Now she was a queen, forging alliances in the name of peace. Life had changed in ways she never could have imagined as a girl. Inside the keep, Gendry showed them to a broad hall with a vaulted ceiling, torches flickering along the walls. The castle's maester, a gray-bearded man named Maester Selwyn, greeted them with a polite bow and offered to attend to any immediate needs: hot baths, medical assistance for any sore riders, and so forth. They ascended wide, spiraling stairs to the living quarters. Sansa was given a suite near the castle's heart, well-guarded and comfortably furnished with thick draperies to ward off the draft. Lena was given quarters not far from hers, each antechamber boasting a small hearth and a window that overlooked the roiling sea below. After settling in, they reconvened in a smaller solar where Gendry typically handled the day-to-day affairs of the Stormlands. Through tall, narrow windows, flashes of lightning illuminated the horizon. The sound of waves crashing against the cliffs resonated like a distant roar. Sansa, Lena, and Gendry gathered around a large wooden table strewn with maps. Gendry pointed to places where roads and bridges were under construction, explaining how trade flowed from the Stormlands northward toward King's Landing or eastward to Tarth. Lena listened attentively, occasionally asking questions about local industries: timber, fishing, a little metalwork. Gendry answered them with straightforward honesty, not embellishing. Sansa suspected that, deep down, Gendry was more comfortable forging blades than forging alliances, but he did his best. Occasionally, their eyes met and she offered him an encouraging nod. When evening came, the three of them took a simple meal in a smaller dining chamber rather than the grand hall. It felt more intimate, less burdened by ceremony. Rain battered the windows and thunder rolled overhead. Lena, sipping a cup of spiced wine, observed, "I see why they call it Storm's End. The entire fortress seems determined to defy the elements." Gendry grinned. "It's the blood of Derngod's grief, they say. He supposedly defied the gods to build this castle. The storms throw themselves at the walls, but Storm's End stands." Lena smiled back. "It's remarkable. Much like the North's resilience to winter." Sansa watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction. She set her goblet down. "I'd be curious to see the blacksmith's workshop tomorrow. I've heard you employed some talented smiths, Gendry, and turned the place into a small arsenal." He nodded eagerly. "It's something I'm proud of. If you'd like, I can show you around. Perhaps Lena, too, unless you find it dull." Lena shook her head. "I'd like to see it. I've always been fascinated by craftsmanship. My father was said to be skilled with a blade in more ways than one, though I suspect forging steel was not among his talents." Gendry's grin broadened, then fell a touch as he realized the reference to Dario Naharis and Essosi Sel's word-turned lover of Daenerys. He cleared his throat, turning the conversation back to local matters. "Good. We'll go after breakfast." In the days that followed, Lena grew familiar with the routines of Storm's End. She walked the ramparts to watch the sea churn, learned the layout of the keep, and spent time with local lords or knights who came to pay respects to their liege lord. Her presence drew curiosity. Some of the knights had fought in the War for the Dawn or in the final battles at King's Landing, and they remembered dragons scorching the sky. A Targaryen under this roof was something they never expected. Yet, as at Winterfell, Lena's courteous manner eased suspicions. She asked about their families, their lands, their experiences rebuilding after the war. Over shared meals and daily routines, she and Gendry found small moments of laughter, teasing each other about their respective upbringings. She in Essos, shielded from the world, and he in Flea Bottom, scraping by in a blacksmith shop. Sansa watched it all unfold, pleased to see a tentative but genuine rapport blossoming between them. She spent her own time meeting with the Stormlands lords, forging agreements on trade with the North, ships that would bring fish and salt to White Harbor while the North sent furs and timber. It was a productive visit. But underlying all of it was the knowledge that an official engagement had yet to be announced. The possibility of union floated in the air like a question that both Gendry and Lena were still weighing. As the second week at Storm's End passed, a raven from Winterfell arrived bearing urgent news. Some travelers from across the narrow sea, claiming to represent the children of the dragon, had landed on the east coast of Westeros near Gulltown in the Vale. They were said to be evangelizing Daenerys' cause, proclaiming that her daughter would soon ascend to the throne, stoking the hope or fear that the dragons would return. The Vale Lords, unsettled by the appearance of these fanatics, had arrested a few of them for disturbing the peace, but more were rumored to have slipped away, heading south, spreading their message. Another letter mentioned that minor riots had broken out in one of the Vale's port towns when a local tavern owner refused them lodging, and rumors circulated that the zealots had threatened retribution by dragonfire. Sansa read this letter in Gendry's solar, her face dark with worry. Lena stood across from her, scanning the lines over her shoulder. Gendry, too, peered at the parchment, his jaw tightening. "So it starts," he muttered. "These zealots want war, or at least want to stir the pot enough to create chaos." Lena's expression was stricken. "And they're using my name. They must have heard rumors that I was traveling south. They probably think I'm here to raise support for a restoration." Sansa lowered the letter, gaze shifting between them. "We have to act quickly. If the Vale is already seeing unrest, it won't be long before it spreads to other areas. These people will feed on rumors and fear. The more attention they get, the more who might join them." Gendry crossed his arms. "What if we call a meeting of the local lords and have Lena denounce these fanatics publicly? Let them see her side by side with me, or with you, Sansa, swearing no intention of claiming the throne. Maybe that'll stamp out the rumors." Lena nodded. "We can try. But these zealots seem determined. If they truly believe I'm destined to be queen, they might interpret any denial as cunning deception. Fanaticism isn't easily reasoned with." Sansa tapped the letter. "All the more reason to show a united front. You two standing together could be a powerful symbol. And if you're officially betrothed, that symbol becomes even stronger. It says you've chosen to align with a lord of Westeros rather than stand apart." Lena and Gendry exchanged glances. He set his jaw, looking at Lena. "We've spent enough time to see we can at least work together, if nothing else. And I do like you," he added with a faint smile, the earnestness in his tone softening the blunt words. "It's not some grand romance, but it doesn't have to be forced misery either. We can build something real, given time." Lena's cheeks warmed slightly. "I feel the same. I'll be honest, I didn't expect to like you. I thought you'd be someone who saw me as a rung on the ladder. But you remind me more of the blacksmith you once were than a scheming lord." "That's a compliment, by the way." Gendry laughed. "I'll take it as one." Sansa allowed herself a small smile, though the gravity of the news weighed on her. "Then you're willing to go through with this engagement?" Lena stepped forward. "Yes. If Gendry is willing, so am I." She placed her hand on the table, fingers splayed. "We need to announce it widely. Let every corner of Westeros know that House Targaryen, what little remains of it, and House Baratheon are joining in marriage with the blessing of House Stark. That might quell the fervor of these zealots, or at least sow enough doubt that they won't easily recruit followers." Gendry placed his hand beside hers, though not touching. "I agree. We'll announce it. We'll send ravens immediately, and we'll make a public statement here at Storm's End. Then, if you think it wise, we can travel to King's Landing or even the Vale to speak directly to the lords there." Sansa nodded, relief threading through her. Yet she knew this was only the beginning of a complex situation. "All right, let's finalize the arrangement. I'll draft the announcements with your approval. We'll proclaim a betrothal, set a date for the wedding, and ask that all loyal lords keep the peace in the realm, acknowledging Lena's vow not to seek the Iron Throne. We'll also convey that any who act in her name without her consent are enemies of both House Baratheon and House Stark." They spent the next day preparing scrolls, seals, and ravens for distribution across Westeros. The language was carefully crafted, with Sansa leaning on her experience from King's Landing and the Vale, ensuring the message was clear. Lena Targaryen, daughter of Daenerys Stormborn, formally pledges alliance with House Baratheon through betrothal. The union was endorsed by the Queen in the north, and it carried the implicit blessing of King Bran, though Sansa penned a separate missive to Bran requesting a more overt statement of support. The hope was that, with King Bran's explicit approval, none could doubt the legitimacy of the arrangement. Gendry held a public gathering in the courtyard of Storm's End, inviting local lords, knights, and townsfolk. In the shadow of the castle's colossal walls, under a sky brimming with potential rain, Lena and Gendry stood side by side, hands clasped before them. Sansa watched from the dais. Her heart fluttered with cautious hope as Gendry announced the betrothal in a voice that carried to the assembled crowd. She saw the shock, curiosity, and even a spark of excitement among the onlookers. Was it so unthinkable that a Targaryen and a Baratheon might unite in peace after all these years? Lena spoke next, her accent carrying a subtle exotic lilt that captured the crowd's attention. People of the Stormlands, I come not as a conqueror, but as someone who wishes to share in your lives and stand beside Lord Baratheon in service to Westeros. I do not seek a throne, nor do I wish any bloodshed in my name. I pledge to join with House Baratheon in marriage so that we might safeguard this realm together. A hush followed. Then a tentative cheer rose, led by some knights who banged their swords against shields. The crowd, uncertain at first, joined in the applause. Sansa breathed more easily. This was a start public acceptance, at least here. She hoped the rest of Westeros would follow suit. Over the next week, letters of acknowledgement began to arrive. Some lords congratulated the couple, praising Sansa's wisdom. Others were more tepid, wary that this was a veneer for a Targaryen plot. A few of the devoutly anti-Targaryen houses expressed alarm, but they tempered their words, mindful that Gendry's own father had led a rebellion against the Targaryens. King Bran's response came in the form of a short decree: I welcome the union of House Targaryen and House Baratheon, brokered by the Queen in the north. May it serve peace and stability across the realms. He signed it with his name and seal, the six-rayed crown. Sansa read it with relief, showing it immediately to Gendry and Lena as confirmation of the crown's official support. Still, news of the children of the dragon in the Vale troubled Sansa. Rumors persisted that these fanatics were planning some dramatic gesture to force the realm's hand. She discussed with Lena and Gendry the possibility of traveling to the Vale to address the matter head-on. Gendry, however, was concerned about leaving Storm's End unguarded for too long, especially after such a recent public announcement. Lena suggested going herself with Sansa while Gendry remained behind to secure his seat. It was a risk, but if Lena confronted the zealots directly, perhaps she could dissuade them. After much deliberation, they agreed. They would gather a moderate-sized escort, enough to deter threats but not so large as to appear in invading force, and make for the Vale. Lord Royce, who effectively governed the Vale on behalf of House Arryn, now led by a young successor, had always been on good terms with Sansa. They would rely on his cooperation. Gendry gave his bride to be a small pendant shaped like a stag's head, saying he hoped it would remind her that the Stormlands stood with her. She accepted it with a smile and a gentle squeeze of his hand. The parting was surprisingly tender. Sansa watched as Lena and Gendry exchanged a brief kiss, simple, polite, but with a warmth that boded well for their future. The retinue set off under gray skies, riding north and east. Sansa felt the old stirrings of anxiety, traveling again, stepping into uncertain territory, bearing an urgent mission that could shape the realm's fate. But she couldn't ignore the threat. If the zealots were truly spreading across the Vale, it was only a matter of time before they found allies or triggered violence. The roads leading to the Vale meandered through rolling hills and mist-shrouded valleys. The weather turned cooler as they gained elevation, and by the time the tall mountains of the Moon Gates rose before them, the wind had sharpened. Sansa led the column with Lena at her side. The nights were spent in hill forts or small inns where they heard increasingly troubling accounts. The zealots, calling themselves Flames of Liberation, had confronted minor lords, urging them to renounce the current king in favor of the Targaryen bloodline. There were rumors they had done more than talk. Some said men had vanished, properties had been burned. Though no one could verify the details, the fear was real. They passed the Bloody Gate, its guards saluting Sansa with respect for the once ward of the Vale. Their party continued into the Vale's interior, where the high peaks encircled lush valleys and pristine lakes. The area itself perched on a distant mountaintop, unreachable by horse, but they would only need to go as far as the Gates of the Moon, a castle at the base of the mountain, where Lord Royce and other Vale lords often convened. The approach wound through steep passes, with waterfalls cascading beside the road. At last, they arrived at the Gates of the Moon, where Lord Royce greeted Sansa and Lena with a courteous bow. He was a gruff, stolid man in heavy plate, runes of House Royce etched into the breastplate. Behind him were several lesser lords and knights. They escorted the newcomers inside, offering them temporary lodgings. Sansa asked for a private meeting with Royce and the assembled Vale lords that very evening, anxious to address the problem of the zealots without delay. That night, in a torchlit hall beneath the imposing presence of the Ares Mountain, Sansa and Lena stood before a gathering of stern-faced Vale lords and knights. Royce, seated at the head of the table, introduced them. Sansa wasted no time. My lords, you are aware of the rumors of Escalation zealots traveling through your lands, claiming to speak for House Targaryen. My companion here, Lena Targaryen, wishes to address you directly. Lena stepped forward, calm but resolute. I am no queen, nor do I seek the throne. I am betrothed to Lord Gendry Baratheon, a union sanctioned by King Bran and brokered by Queen Sansa. These fanatics, these so-called flames of liberation, do not speak for me. I denounce any violence they commit, any attempts to manipulate you in my name. Lord Royce inclined his head. We've arrested several who call themselves your followers, but more remain at large. Some are armed, and they move in small groups, preaching that you will soon dethrone King Bran and return dragons to the sky. Sansa exchanged a grave look with Lena. We need your cooperation in rooting them out. Let the Vale's lords be vigilant. Spread the word that Lena rejects their cause entirely. If they resist arrest, you're within your rights to use force. A lord in the back, a hawk-nosed man with a stern gaze, rose to speak. Queen Sansa, Lady Lena. Some say these zealots are only the beginning. Rumor has it that in Essos they're gathering ships. Could this be an invasion force in the making? Lena's voice was firm. I cannot speak for distant plots, but I wouldn't doubt that some die-hard loyalists to my mother's memory might try such a thing. That is why we must unite here, so that no opportunist from across the sea believes Westeros is divided. Royce glanced at the other lords, nodding slowly. You have our support, Your Grace. The Vale stands with House Stark, as always. We will put down these zealots wherever we find them. But be warned, fanaticism is like wildfire. Once it catches, it spreads unpredictably. Sansa thanked them, urging swift action. They discussed patrols, watchtowers, and how to handle captured zealots. Royce advised caution, noting that open conflict in the mountains could be bloody and difficult. Still, the lords agreed to coordinate. Sansa left the meeting with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. Even if they could quell the zealots in the Vale, what if more arrived from Essos? In the corridor afterward, Lena voiced her worry. I fear that this is just the start. If the Vale crackdowns intensify, the zealots might flee south or west, spreading more chaos. We need a unified strategy with the other regions too. Sansa nodded. We'll make sure to send updates to King's Landing, the Stormlands, and the Reach. Dorne as well. If we can present a cohesive front, the zealots will find no safe haven. She paused, her eyes flickering with a thought. But we're forgetting one corner of Westeros, the Iron Islands. They've never been predictable, and if someone there sees profit in chaos, they might help these zealots. Lena's brow furrowed. Then we better ensure the Ironborn stay out of it. How do we do that? Sansa sighed. I'm not entirely sure. Yara Greyjoy once supported our cause against the Night King, but the Iron Islands follow their own ways. We might need to send an envoy to remind them that a stable Westeros is in their best interest too. They walked on, heading toward their chambers. Outside, the wind whistled across the courtyard, carrying a crisp mountain chill. Sansa felt the weight of all these decisions pressing on her. How many times had she yearned for a quiet life, free of politics and war? Yet here she was, forging alliances, quelling zealots, striving to keep the realm from tearing itself apart. Somehow, she found the strength to keep going, perhaps because the alternative was letting the darkness of anarchy and bloodshed swallow them all. Lena retired to her quarters, but Sansa stayed up late, writing letters by candlelight. She described the situation in the Vale, urging swift coordination from the other regions. She penned a personal note to Gendry, assuring him of Lena's well-being and describing their plans. Then she began drafting a letter for Yara Greyjoy, carefully worded to request her neutrality and vigilance in case any ships carrying these zealots approached the Iron Islands. When she finally lay down to rest, her mind refused to quiet. She recalled the intangible presence she'd felt as a girl, a sense that the old gods watched over the north. Now, she wondered if the old gods or the Seven or the Lord of Light or any other deity had a hand in this unfolding drama of Targaryens and Baratheons, zealots and alliances. Perhaps the gods were silent watchers, leaving mortals to shape their own fates. She drifted into uneasy sleep, haunted by images of fiery fanatics chanting Lena's name, even as Lena stood in the courtyard of Storm's End pledging peace. The next day, a steady rain fell, misting the Vale's peaks. Sansa and Lena toured the camp of soldiers Royce had assembled, giving a brief speech to bolster their morale. It seemed that word of Lena's presence and her denouncement of the zealots had already begun to spread. Soldiers asked her directly, "Do you truly vow not to bring dragons upon us?" She answered calmly each time, "I vow it," until Sansa saw the relief in their eyes. The threat of dragon fire lingered in living memory for many. That afternoon, a grim-faced scout arrived requesting an urgent audience. He told Lord Royce, Sansa, and Lena that a band of about 20 armed zealots had seized a small village in the foothills, intimidating locals and claiming they would hold the ground until the Targaryen queen arrives. They had apparently declared they would only surrender to Daenerys' daughter. Sansa and Lena glanced at each other. Royce frowned. "This is madness. We should send a detachment to root them out by force. Show these fanatics we won't tolerate their nonsense." Lena hesitated. "I could try talking to them first. If they're so intent on seeing me, perhaps I can convince them to stand down. They might not believe anyone else." Royce looked skeptical. "These are armed fanatics. If you walk into that village, you might as well step into a bear trap." Sansa reached for Lena's arm, worry etched on her face. "He's right. It's too dangerous. They might believe you're being coerced by House Stark or manipulated. What if they turn on you?" Lena lifted her chin. "If I don't at least try, we might have a bloodbath. And that blood would be spilled in my name. I can't stand by and let that happen without attempting a peaceful resolution." Sansa recognized the determination in her eyes, the same resolve Sansa had felt in critical moments of her own life. She glanced at Royce. "We can't just let her go alone. We'll send a contingent of knights to protect her, but they'll keep their distance unless absolutely necessary." Royce exhaled sharply. "So be it. I'll send my best men." Sansa took Lena aside. "This is incredibly risky. Fanatics aren't rational. You have to be prepared for anything." Lena nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I understand. But what kind of leader would I be if I let others die in a battle that might be avoided? I'd never forgive myself. And I want to prove to these people, if they can be reasoned with, that I'm not the conqueror they imagine." 2 hours later, a small force set out: Lena, Sansa, a dozen knights under Royce's banner, and a few archers. They moved quickly through winding mountain roads, the rain and mist cloaking them in a somber veil. The village lay in a narrow valley nestled by a rushing stream. As they approached, they saw smoke rising from a few chimneys. Proof that the villagers were still there, likely sheltering from the intruders. The zealots had posted lookouts. Figures in mismatched armor stood at the entrance to the village, crude banners depicting a red dragon on black cloth. Sansa's gut twisted at the sight of it. At a signal from Sansa, the party came to a halt at a distance. Lena rode forward alone, though Sansa followed at a short remove with a knight holding a white flag of parley. The zealot lookouts tensed, gripping their weapons. One called out in a thick accent, "Who goes there?" Lena pulled back her hood, revealing the pale hair and striking features. Her voice rang clearly across the damp air. "I am Lena Targaryen, daughter of Daenerys Storborn. I've come to speak with you." A stir ran among the zealots. Some fell to their knees, calling out praises. "She has come, the dragon's daughter." Others looked suspicious. One, a tall man with shaven head and a scar down his cheek, stepped forward. "If you are truly the daughter of Daenerys, then you will take your rightful place and free Westeros from false kings." Lena shook her head, her voice unwavering. "I seek no throne. I am betrothed to Lord Gendry Baratheon, with the blessing of the rightful king, Bran the Broken. You do not serve me by terrorizing villagers. I command you to lay down your arms and release this place." The zealots erupted into frantic murmuring. Some looked devastated, others angry. The tall man sneered. "Lies. She must be forced to see her true destiny. The dragons shall rise again." He brandished a wicked-looking curved blade. "You are being controlled by these traitors, these northern wolves who fear your birthright." Sansa's horse shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. She kept her gaze locked on Lena, ready to signal the knights if violence erupted. Lena raised her voice above the clamor. "My destiny is my own. I am not a puppet, nor am I a conqueror. If you truly revere my mother, remember that she once sought to free people from tyranny. Yet here you are, acting like tyrants, holding innocent folk in fear. This is not what my mother fought for." A few of the zealots glanced among themselves uncertainly. But the tall man's fury only grew. "Daenerys burned a city to ash rather than surrender. You speak of freedom, yet you deny her rightful legacy. I cannot believe you are truly her daughter." He gestured sharply, and several zealots raised crossbows. Lena's horse stamped, sensing the threat. Sansa tensed, heart pounding. Royce's knights bristled, hands on hilts. Lena held up a hand, signaling them to remain still. "My mother also freed thousands of slaves and was revered as Mysa by the freedmen of Essos. If you claim to honor her, then let these villagers go. You want to follow a Targaryen? Then follow my command. Stand down." For a heartbeat, it seemed as though her words might penetrate. But the tall man shouted, "I won't be swayed by false talk. We'll hold this village until the true Targaryen queen is revealed." An arrow whistled from the side, lodging in the ground near the man's feet. One of Royce's archers had loosed a warning shot. The zealots shouted, scattering. Crossbow bolts whined through the damp air, and Lena's horse reared. Sansa instantly signaled the knights, "Shield Lena." They spurred forward, forming a protective line as more arrows flew, forcing the zealots to duck behind a crude barricade. Sansa guided her horse next to Lena, voice taut. "Get back, or you'll be shot." But Lena refused to flee outright. Instead, she urged her horse a few steps back, calling to the zealots once more. "Stop this madness. I don't want your blood on my hands. Surrender now." Her plea was answered by a crossbow bolt that hissed past her head, missing by inches. Sansa's heart lurched. She grabbed Lena's reins, practically dragging her away. "We can't reason with them now. Come on." They retreated to safer ground as Royce's knights moved in formation. The zealots retreated deeper into the village, some taking positions on rooftops. It was clear the situation had dissolved into violence. Sansa cursed under her breath. She'd hoped Lena's presence might prevent a fight, but the fanatics were too entrenched in their delusions. Royce's men advanced methodically, returning fire with arrows whenever a zealot popped up. The village itself was caught in the middle, frightened families huddled in their homes, pinned by the crossfire. Sansa realized with horror that if the knights pushed too aggressively, civilian lives would be at risk. She glanced at Lena, who looked stricken, tears threatening to well in her eyes. "I wanted to stop this," she whispered hoarsely. "Now it's going to be a slaughter." Sansa's mind raced. She turned to one of Royce's captains. "Order your men to surround the village, but hold the line. Do not charge in. We need to evacuate civilians if possible." The captain nodded, relaying the orders with a blast on his horn. The knights began to spread out, forming a perimeter. Zealots responded with occasional bolts, though their supplies of ammunition seemed limited. Lena, trembling with anger and sorrow, spoke to Sansa. "Let me try once more. If I go in on foot, unarmed." Sansa grabbed her arm. "No. They'll kill you. You can't help anyone dead." "I'm sorry, Lena, but we have to do this carefully." Hours slipped by in a tense standoff. Royce's men stationed themselves in every possible avenue of escape, halting the zealots from fleeing. Meanwhile, a few local villagers crept out with white cloths tied to sticks, seeking refuge. Sansa ensured they were ushered to safety behind the lines. The zealots refused to surrender. As dusk descended, the knights prepared for a slow, methodical advance, using shields to protect themselves and torches to illuminate the narrow alleys. Lena dismounted, pacing restlessly. "This is pointless death. We should find a way to end this without a frontal assault." Sansa felt the weight of command pressing down on her, an echo of decisions she'd seen Robb Stark make long ago. "If they'd listen, we would. But their leader is certain you're not the real Targaryen heir or that you're corrupted. We can't negotiate with someone who won't even hear you." She steeled herself. "The best we can do is minimize casualties." Lena's eyes clouded with sorrow. "Then let's do it." Royce's captain signaled the advance. A line of knights bearing large shields moved into the village, using the narrow streets for cover. Archers behind them prepared to shoot down any zealot who appeared. Sansa, from a vantage on a slight hill overlooking the village, watched the flickering torchlight reflect off damp cobblestones. Shouts echoed in the alleyways, followed by the clang of steel. Sansa's stomach twisted, hating the sound of fighting in a place where ordinary families lived. Gradually, the zealots were forced into a cluster near the village square. Some tried to break the perimeter, but archers picked them off. The tall man with the scar emerged, brandishing his blade. "This is betrayal," he roared. "You can't kill the faithful." He struck down one of Royce's knights, only to be skewered by two more. Sansa looked away at the moment of impact, her hand trembling. Lena stood beside her, face pale. Soon it was over. Royce's knights overcame the last pockets of resistance. Many zealots lay dead or wounded, and a few survivors threw down their weapons, crying for mercy. The villagers, freed from fear, cautiously emerged. Sansa hurried down to the square, wanting to see if there was anything she could do to help the wounded. Lena followed. The scene was grim. Bodies sprawled in the mud, torches casting flickering shadows on the fallen. A few zealots moaned for aid, while knights guarded them warily. Sansa's heart clenched. This was not the grand victory she had hoped for. This was just blood and loss. Lena knelt beside a dying zealot, a young woman whose eyes were wide with confusion. You're her," she gasped. Why do you side with them?" Blood bubbled at her lips. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I side with no one who sheds innocent blood." She pressed a hand to the woman's wound, but it was too late. The light faded from the zealot's gaze, her last breath rattling free. Lena shut her eyes, grief etched into her features. Sansa laid a hand on Lena's shoulder, feeling a hollow ache in her own chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You did your best." Lena rose slowly, wiping her tears. She surveyed the carnage, her voice quavering. "This is exactly what I wanted to prevent. How many more times will it happen if more of these zealots arrive?" Sansa shook her head. "We keep doing what we must, denouncing them, capturing them, making it clear they won't find support here. We can't save everyone from their own fanaticism, Lena." They helped the villagers as much as possible, assisting Royce's men in clearing away the bodies. The knights discovered a few hastily scrawled documents among the zealots' possessions, letters from across the sea, referencing a leader called the Flamebearer, who promised that Daenerys' legacy would soon reclaim Westeros. It seemed these zealots were but a vanguard. Afterward, Sansa and Lena rode back to the Gates of the Moon with heavy hearts, determined to send immediate word to King's Landing, Storm's End, and Winterfell, warning that the threat was more organized than they realized. By the time they dismounted in the courtyard, night had fully fallen and a cold wind whipped across the Vale's peaks. Lena turned to Sansa as they walked into the keep. "I'll do anything to stop more bloodshed. If it means traveling to King's Landing, to the Iron Islands, even across the sea to speak against these factions, I'll go. I won't let this madness claim more innocent lives." Sansa nodded, her own resolve hardening. "We'll coordinate with Bran. If an envoy to Essos is necessary, perhaps a royal fleet can be arranged. But we'll do it together. We'll gather allies, rally the lords. The realm will stand behind us if we show them we stand for peace." Yet, as she spoke these determined words, she couldn't dispel the image of the dying zealot in Lena's arms. The fanatic had looked at Lena with such devotion and disbelief, unable to reconcile the gentle woman before her with the fiery conqueror she had envisioned. That was the power of illusions, the power of a dream to resurrect the dead. Sansa felt a chill deeper than any mountain wind, for she knew the battles to come might not be fought solely on fields of steel, but in the hearts and minds of a realm scarred by history. Still, in Lena's grief, Sansa saw a mirror of her own desperation to protect the innocent, and she vowed silently that they would face this rising threat together as wolves and dragons united. A promise that might yet shape the future of Westeros in ways the realm had never seen before. In the days that followed, the Gates of the Moon became a hub of frantic communication. Sansa sent out ravens to all corners of the realm. Lord Royce dispatched patrols to hunt any remaining zealots in the mountains. News arrived that a smaller group had been discovered and disbanded by local knights without much bloodshed, suggesting that some at least would surrender if confronted. But the letters from the coast were more concerning. Sightings of unfamiliar ships near the Bight, rumored to hail from the free cities. Though none had made overt hostile actions yet, their presence was noted. The rumor mill churned with talk of sellswords, hidden cargo, and foreign gold fueling the flames of Targaryen loyalism. Sansa decided the time had come to confer directly with King Bran. She proposed traveling to King's Landing, but Lena worried that such a move might be seen by the zealots as an attempt to centralize power, something they could use to fuel their conspiracy narratives. Still, they needed the crown's support, and they needed to coordinate with Gendry as well. In the end, they agreed. Sansa would go to King's Landing with a modest escort to consult with Bran and his council. Lena would remain in the Vale a little longer, working with Lord Royce to root out any remaining zealot cells and help the villagers recover. Then she would meet Sansa and Gendry in the capital when the time was right. Parting from Lena felt odd to Sansa. They had spent so many weeks side by side in adversity that she had grown used to the younger woman's presence. But she understood Lena's reasoning. The Vale needed her direct reassurance, and her presence might help quell any lingering doubts among Royce's people. They shared a brief embrace. "Be safe," Sansa said softly. "King's Landing can be treacherous." Lena managed a faint smile. "I'm more worried about you. Give my regards to Gendry if he meets you there." With that, Sansa set off, traveling south and then west along the roads that wound past the foothills of the Vale. Her escort was small but well-disciplined. The days passed in a blur of travel. The countryside showed signs of cautious prosperity, fields sprouting with new crops under mild spring rains. Yet talk of Targaryen loyalists kept surfacing at inns and crossroads, as if the entire realm braced for an uncertain future. Some old veterans muttered that Westeros had never truly recovered from Daenerys' assault on King's Landing, that her ghost still haunted the realm's nightmares. Others scoffed, convinced that no Targaryen plot could stand against the combined might of the Six Kingdoms. Sansa kept her silence, uncertain which vantage was correct. After nearly a fortnight, the party reached the environs of King's Landing. The city shimmered in the distance, the waters of Blackwater Bay reflecting the golden light of a setting sun. Sansa approached the gates with her escort, noting the new construction that had arisen since the city's partial destruction years ago. King Bran's reign had been peaceful and measured, focusing on rebuilding and stability, yet a quiet hush seemed to linger in the streets, perhaps a vestige of the trauma inflicted by dragonfire. The walls bore scars that had never been fully repaired, and sections of the city had a patchwork look. They rode through the gate, past the gold cloaks who saluted half-heartedly. Sansa glimpsed a mixture of respect and resentment in the guards' eyes. The queen of a sovereign north was still a curious figure in the capital. She made her way up toward the Red Keep, which perched on the rocky promontory above. Despite all she had endured here, despite the ghosts of her past, Sansa felt a strange wave of calm. The city no longer held power over her. She had grown beyond fear. At the Red Keep's gates, an official in the royal household stepped forward to greet her. "Queen Sansa, King Bran awaits you in his solar. Shall we escort you at once?" She nodded, dismounting. Her guards led the horses away while the official guided her inside. The castle's corridors were familiar yet changed, some walls newly reconstructed, others showing signs of partial ruin from the conflict that ended Daenerys's reign. The hush in the hallways was almost eerie, as if the fortress itself dwelled in reflection. At last, they arrived at a set of doors flanked by two silent guards. The official bowed. "He's within, Your Grace." Sansa thanked him quietly and entered. Bran sat near a window overlooking the city. He was no longer a boy, but a young man whose bearing still seemed unearthly, his calm gaze hinting at distant visions. He wore simple robes, a crown resting on a table nearby, fashioned of slender metal branches. When Sansa stepped in, he turned his head slowly to regard her, a slight warmth in his expression. "Sister," he said, his voice measured. "You've come at last. I trust your journey was safe." Sansa inclined her head. "Safe enough. There were troubles in the Vale, but we managed to quell them for now." She approached, noticing how Bran seemed less physically frail than he once was, though he still used a chair with wheels. "I've much to tell you." He gestured for her to sit. "Then begin." She took a seat beside him, letting out a small breath. She described the betrothal of Gendry and Lena, the rising threat of Escalation zealots, the confrontation in the Vale village that had ended in bloodshed. Bran listened intently, his gaze occasionally drifting to the window as if searching for something beyond. When she finished, he sighed softly. "The realm stands on a precipice," he murmured. "Old loyalties and new fears converge. The memory of dragons still burns in men's minds, fueling dreams of conquest or nightmares of fire." Sansa nodded, sadness edging her voice. "These zealots won't be easily stopped by a single victory. They claim to have support in Esso's ships that might sail west. We need to show unwavering unity, houses, crown, the north, all of us." Bran's posture was still. "We shall. I will call a great council in King's Landing, inviting lords from every region to affirm their allegiance to peace and to acknowledge the betrothal as a symbol of that peace. Let them see Lena with their own eyes, hear her words, and witness the realm's united stance." Sansa considered it. A great council, that is a significant move. Some might question the cost or the necessity. Bran turned his calm gaze upon her. "Some questioned why we fought together against the Night King, but we did. This moment is not so different. The threat is more human, but no less dangerous to the realm's stability." He paused, letting his eyes drift closed for a heartbeat. "I have seen glimpses in my visions, fleets crossing the sea, men armed with fanatic devotion. Blood could fill the waters of Blackwater Bay if we do not act. A council might be the gathering that either cements our unity or reveals our divisions." Sansa swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. "Then we must ensure it cements our unity. I'll do everything I can to bring the northern lords into full support. Gendry will rally the Stormlands. If Lena is there to speak, perhaps the rest of the realm will see reason." Bran nodded. "Send the ravens. We'll host this council as soon as practical. Time is short." He placed a hand on hers, a gesture of quiet affection. "I've long believed in your ability to guide the realm, Sansa. Now more than ever, I need your help." She felt a surge of emotion at his rare show of familial closeness. "We're in this together, Bran. Always." That night, the Red Keep bustled with renewed purpose as orders went out under the king's seal. Messages flew across the land. The king summoned a great council in King's Landing to address the threat of foreign invasion and the question of the Targaryen betrothal. Lords were urged to arrive within a moon's turn if possible, each allowed to bring a small retinue for safety but no large armies. The memory of how a gathering of lords once preceded the War of the Five Kings was not lost on Sansa. She only prayed this time the outcome would be different. Within days, Gendry Baratheon arrived from the Stormlands. He met with Sansa and Bran, expressing readiness to stand by Lynna's side at the council. Soon after, a letter came from Lynna. She had made progress in the Vale, capturing or disbanding several zealot pockets. She was on her way, accompanied by Lord Royce and a small guard. Sansa felt relief at hearing Lynna was safe, though she remained anxious about the broader situation. One by one, delegations trickled into King's Landing. The Tyrell name was gone, but the Reach was represented by several lesser lords. Dorne sent a party led by the ruling princess, who traveled under heavy guard. The Iron Islands delegation arrived too, led by a grim-faced envoy of Yara's, since the Lady of the Iron Islands herself chose to remain at Pike. The Riverlands, the Westerlands, the Vale, and even some from the north all converged. The capital teemed with the banners of many houses, an uneasy spectacle of unity that might unravel at the slightest provocation. Sansa took up temporary residence in a set of chambers near Bran's, overseeing the preparations. The main hall of the Red Keep was being readied for the formal sessions, seats arranged in a vast semicircle with a dais at the front for King Bran. Though Bran sat on the Iron Throne only for ceremonial matters, he usually used a more practical seat or his wheeled chair. This council would likely see him on that melted symbol of Targaryen rule, which had survived Daenerys's fury but was forever changed, half-twisted by her dragon's flame. At last, word came that Lynna Targaryen's party had reached the city gates. Sansa and Gendry went down to greet her, surrounded by curious onlookers. She arrived on horseback, flanked by Royce's knights, wearing a plain gray traveling cloak with a small Baratheon stag pendant at her neck. The watchers whispered as she dismounted, wondering at the sight of a living Targaryen who had come in peace. When she spotted Gendry, Lynna's face lit with relief, and she hurried to him. Gendry smiled shyly, as though uncertain how to greet his betrothed in the gaze of so many. They exchanged a brief embrace and a few murmured words. Sansa felt a small spark of hope. At least this part of the plan had a beating heart behind it. They escorted Lynna into the Red Keep, where she was shown to a suite near Sansa's. She wasted no time, however, in requesting a meeting with Bran. That evening, the four of them, Bran, Sansa, Gendry, and Lynna, gathered in a private solar. Bran regarded Lynna with the same measured calm he bestowed on everyone, though there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "It is good to finally meet you properly," Bran said. "Though I've watched your arrival in my own way, to see you in person is different." Lynna inclined her head. "I've heard that you know many things. I'm honored you allowed me to remain in Westeros without challenge." Bran's tone was composed. "I had no desire to condemn you for something you had not done. Now, we face a crisis that demands we stand together. Are you prepared for what comes?" She gave a resolute nod. "Yes, Your Grace. I'll do whatever it takes to prevent more bloodshed." Bran shifted his gaze to Sansa, then back to Lynna and Gendry. "The Great Council convenes in 3 days. Representatives from all over Westeros will be gathered. I will open the floor for discussion of the foreign threat, and you two will address the lords about your betrothal. Be prepared for questions, challenges, even insults. Some may demand proof of your lineage or scorn your union. Stand firm, and we will see if we can sway them." Gendry straightened. "We will, Your Grace. House Baratheon stands with the crown, with House Stark, and with Lynna." Lynna spoke quietly. "I can show them my mother's letters, speak Valyrian if needed, but beyond that, I only have my word." Bran nodded. "It may suffice. The realm has known you for some time now, thanks to Sansa, but seeing you here in the capital is different. Many hold memories of your mother's final act of destruction. They will need convincing that you are not destined to repeat it." Lynna's eyes flickered with sorrow. "I understand." For the next 3 days, tension mounted throughout the city as lords and ladies continued to arrive, each bringing whispered rumors of zealot sightings or suspicious ships off the coast. The common folk were on edge, sensing that some pivotal moment was coming. The Red Keep teemed with activity. Sansa found herself thrust into a role akin to a master negotiator, gliding between delegations, assuring them of the king's steady leadership, praising the Targaryen Baratheon betrothal as a sign of unity. She glimpsed Lena doing the same, with Gendry at her side, each wearing formal attire that hinted at both houses' colors, Baratheon gold and black, Targaryen red and black. They were an intriguing pair, the blacksmith lord and the exiled daughter of a dragon queen, forging a new path in uncertain times. On the morning of the council's opening session, the great hall was filled with the clamor of voices. Rows of chairs had been placed facing the dais, where the Iron Throne loomed, twisted and menacing under the torchlight. King Bran's arrival was subdued, a hush falling as he was wheeled into place at the foot of the throne by a steward. He still wore his simple robes and the slender crown, but the aura of kingship clung to him in the respectful silence of the hall. Sansa stood to his right, Lena and Gendry a step behind. Each region's delegates took their seats. The Dornish princess, the lords of the Westerlands, the Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, the Iron Islands, and the North. Bran began with a calm address, invoking the memories of unity that defeated the Night King and ended the destructive wars of the previous decades. He warned of a new threat, fanatics from across the sea invoking the Targaryen name to sow discord. He called for cooperation to prevent foreign powers from gaining a foothold. Then he invited Lord Gendry Baratheon and Lena Targaryen to speak of their proposed union. Gendry stepped forward first, addressing the gathered lords. He spoke plainly, with no flowery words. He recounted how Daenerys Stormborn had legitimized him, how he had inherited Storm's End, how he had fought alongside Stark and Targaryen alike against the undead. He declared that marrying Lena would bridge the old wounds between Baratheon and Targaryen. Then he gestured for Lena to speak. She stepped up, the hall's eyes riveted on her. Sansa saw the flicker of nerves in Lena's posture, but she steadied herself, letting her voice carry. My lords and ladies, I stand before you not as a claimant to any throne, but as one born of Westeros by blood and of Essos by upbringing. I have seen what fanaticism can do. It twists hope into violence. It warps the memory of my mother until all that remains is Dragonfire. But we are more than the sum of our past tragedies. Lord Gendry and I pledge ourselves to each other, not to impose a dynasty, but to unite our houses for peace. Anyone who wages war in my name does so against my will. I beg you to trust that I do not seek to repeat my mother's path. I come with open hands, not with Dragonfire. A murmuring arose in the hall, an undercurrent of reaction. Some looked moved, others skeptical. One of the lords from the Westerlands rose, his voice echoing. A union of Baratheon and Targaryen is all well and good, but what stops you from producing a child who claims the Iron Throne by blood? Lena answered firmly, Our children, if we have them, will inherit the Stormlands. I have sworn no claim to the throne. King Bran is our sovereign, and I support his heir when the time comes, whoever that may be. Another lord, from the Riverlands, pressed, What if the zealots bring dragons? Rumor says they might have eggs. Will you call them to your side? Lena shook her head. I have no knowledge of living dragons or eggs. If any exist, I do not claim them. My loyalty is to peace. The debate went on. Some expressed acceptance or even relief. Others voiced suspicion or scorn, recalling the horrors unleashed on King's Landing. Throughout it all, Bran remained impassive, listening, occasionally interjecting in his calm tone that the realm needed unity, not accusations. Sansa watched the interplay, stepping in a few times to remind the lords that House Stark endorsed this betrothal. Gradually, the tension ebbed, replaced by cautious approval from the majority. It was no unanimous acclamation, but it was far from outright rejection. When the matter of the betrothal seemed settled, Bran shifted the discussion to the foreign threat. Lords and ladies recounted sightings of strange ships, mysterious travelers, and preachers who spoke of Lena's ascension. Some demanded immediate naval action, a blockade of the narrow sea to prevent any incursion. Others cautioned that might provoke an actual invasion. The debate turned heated, voices rising in alarm or defiance. Then a representative from the Iron Islands stood. He was a lean man with salt-encrusted leathers, scars crossing his arms. The Iron Fleet could intercept any suspicious vessels, but we won't do it for free. The crown would need to meet certain conditions like ceding more autonomy to the Iron Islands, reducing tariffs on our trade. Sansa's jaw clenched. She remembered how the Ironborn always seemed to want special privileges, threatening raids or inaction otherwise. Before she could retort, Bran's voice cut through. We will discuss fair compensation. But this threat touches all corners of the realm, including the islands. If a foreign fleet takes a foothold, the Iron Islands could be at risk. The Iron Islander grunted, then sat. The Princess of Dorne spoke next, elegantly pointing out that a blockade would do little if the Essosi decided to land in the south or slip through the stepstones. She proposed reinforcing the watchtowers along the coast. In the swirl of voices, Gendry reminded them that Storm's End had watchful eyes on the eastern shipping lanes and would coordinate with other lords. Slowly, a patchwork plan began to form: coastal defenses, shared information on shipping manifests, an agreement that any foreign mercenaries or unflagged ships be reported to the crown. While it was not a perfect solution, it showed that the realm was willing to act in concert. The feeling in the hall was one of guarded optimism, a sense that perhaps Westeros could stand united against any threat if they kept their alliances strong. As the day's session drew to a close, Bran signaled for quiet. My lords and ladies, we have taken steps toward peace and stability. The betrothal of House Baratheon and Targaryen stands as a beacon of reconciliation. Our defenses will be strengthened. Let us remain vigilant, for storms may yet come. For now, let us adjourn and reconvene on the morrow to finalize the details. An almost palpable exhale of relief spread through the hall. Delegates began to file out, some discussing trade-offs or further details. Lena stood near Gendry, looking drained but relieved that the session had not devolved into chaos. Sansa approached, placing a reassuring hand on Lena's arm. You did well, she said softly. You answered them with honesty, and that carries weight. Lena managed a small, weary smile. Thank you. I can only hope the realm believes me. Gendry exhaled. If anyone tries to question your loyalties now, we have dozens of witnesses to your public vow. They headed out of the hall together, ascending a corridor that led back to their chambers. The echoes of the debate lingered in the empty passages, reminding Sansa of how precarious their unity was. As they reached a bend, however, a hooded figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. Guards immediately moved to intercept, hands on sword hilts. But the figure raised empty palms, lowering the hood to reveal an old woman's face, deeply lined, eyes hard with purpose. She looked directly at Lena. My queen, she rasped. Lena froze, eyes widening. Sansa's heart clenched. Another fanatic? Here in the Red Keep? The old woman ignored the guard's warnings, focusing on Lena with fervent intensity. My queen, she repeated, tears in her eyes. My name is Elia. I served your mother in Meereen before fleeing to Lys. I've traveled so far to find you. Her voice broke. The others, they twist my queen's legacy. But you can do what Daenerys dreamed. End slavery once and for all, beyond the seas. Lena's face clouded, torn between sympathy and alarm. I'm sorry. I cannot sail across the sea to fight wars. Elia trembled, reaching a hand forward. The guards pushed her back. Don't you see? They're building armies in your name. They say they'll cross the sea and free the slaves of Volantis and the others. They worship you as the living heir. If you do not lead them, someone else will. Please, come with me or they'll burn Essos to the ground. Sansa's blood ran cold. Burn Essos to the ground. Another prophecy of destruction in Lena's name. She stepped forward carefully. Elia, the queen you seek does not want more war. She wants peace. The woman collapsed to her knees, a racking sob escaping her. Then we are doomed. They will come anyway. They have a dragon egg. Or so they claim. They will raise a monstrous beast and ravage the world in your mother's memory. Lena stared at the old woman, her voice shaken. A dragon egg? That's impossible. The last were destroyed or taken. My mother's dragons hatched from seemingly dead stone, but... Elia sobbed again. They claim to have found one in the scorched ruins near Meereen. They mean to hatch it and use it to bring you to power willingly or not. A hush fell on the corridor. Gendry and Sansa exchanged horrified glances. If these fanatics truly possessed a dragon egg, even if it was an unhatched relic, the mere possibility would incite terror or ambition on an unimaginable scale. Lena's voice was hoarse. Where's this group now? Elia shook her head, tears streaking her wrinkled cheeks. I don't know. They have cells in Lys, Volantis, and others. They spoke of hiring the Golden Company or some other cells word army to cross the sea. They said they'd attack from multiple points to draw out King Bran's forces. Unless you joined them willingly, they would burn Westeros until you knelt. She clutched at the hem of Lena's cloak, desperation in her eyes. I've done my part. I've warned you. Save Essos. Save them from themselves. Lena stood still, overwhelmed. Sansa felt the corridor spinning with implications. If even half of Elia's tale was true, a new war of dragons and fanaticism might loom on the horizon. But how could they stop it? The realm had no living dragon, no unstoppable force to counter such a threat, only alliances, armies, and a fragile peace. The old woman's warning battered Sansa's mind with dire possibilities. She clenched her fists, forcing steadiness into her voice as she addressed Elia. We'll try to prevent this. We'll gather the realm's lords and see what can be done. Your warning is invaluable. Elia nodded feebly, collapsing forward. The guards caught her, guiding her gently aside. Gendry signaled for a maester, who arrived swiftly to tend the exhausted woman. Lena stood silent, tears shining in her eyes. Sansa placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a supportive squeeze. We'll face it, she whispered. If a new dragon threat rises, we'll face it united. Lena swallowed hard. But if they have an egg and they hatch it? Sansa forced a calm she did not feel. We've faced dragons before. Daenerys's dragons were once unstoppable, yet she was defeated. We must hold to hope and to our alliances. Lena nodded, though fear lingered in her gaze. They continued onto their chambers in a somber hush, each grappling with the terrifying prospect that an era of dragonfire might be reignited by the very fanatics Lena sought to stop. And though the Great Council had shown unity on the surface, Sansa wondered if that unity would hold in the face of an actual invasion, a foe wielding dragonfire, and the twisted idealism of an impossible queen reborn. She had no simple answers, only the will to protect the realm she loved, side by side with a woman bearing the name Targaryen and a king whose powers of sight extended beyond mortal bounds. Yet even that might not be enough if the flames of fanaticism truly took hold, fed by the unholy dream of resurrecting the dragons that once bound Westeros in fire and blood. Thus ended the council's day on a note of dread, the specter of a dragon egg threatening to shatter the fragile peace. And in the silent corridors of the Red Keep, where shadows flickered like omens, Sansa Stark could almost feel the heartbeat of the realm quicken, as though every stone awaited the coming storm and prayed that wolves and dragons, bound by newfound fellowship, might withstand whatever monstrous form the night would soon reveal.